Chapter 1867. After dinner, Yi Yu played with Li Jianyue for a while before heading home with Li Jinan. When she got home, Yi Yu realized how monotonous her house was. She let out a long sigh, rubbed her belly and said, "There are still a few months left. Baby mommy is so bored." Li Jinan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Why would I? I'll accompany you." "You're busy all day." "Oh right. I'm going for a prenatal checkup tomorrow." "Well, I'll tell my assistant that I won't be going to the office tomorrow. Let's accompany the baby for the checkup." Li Jinan's voice was low and sexy. She smiled and tugged at his sleeve. "I'm going to take a shower. Want to join me?" Li Jinan was speechless. Yi Qianqian had hot pot with Shenjilia, and then went to an arcade to relax for a while before heading to the hotel near the office to check in. After taking a shower and changing into a fresh set of clothes, Yi Qianqian lay in bed and waited for Shenjilia to return from his shower. She couldn't help but take out her phone and open the remote surveillance video. Yi Qianqian rewound the video and watched it from the moment they left the house. She fast-forwarded all the way, but there was no sign of anyone. Yi Qianqian was merely watching out of boredom. It was one thing to be worried, but on second thought, she didn't seem to be a threat. Apart from a ridiculously tall nose and a face full of acne, there seemed to be nothing noteworthy about that person's face. However, just these two characteristics were already extremely rare. Yi Qianqian flipped through the pages and yawned in boredom. He was sleepy. Yi Qianqian had slept too late the night before and had woken up too early that morning. She had also suffered a shock. Her energy seemed to have been depleted. The image on the phone dimmed bit by bit. The fast-forward was not particularly exaggerated, and it was enough to clearly see every scene and every moment. The powerful night vision function displayed the entire pitch-black house on the screen. Even though there was no light in the house, he could still see everything inside clearly. However, all of a sudden, a shadow appeared in the dark room. Yi Qianqian's drowsiness was immediately chased away, and she stood up straight. His heartbeat suddenly seemed to jump up to his throat, terrifying and turbulent. Yi Qianqian paused the video and saw a shadow in the distance. It was a person. He looked a little tall and strong, wearing a cap and a black t-shirt. He was sneakily walking inside. Yi Qianqian's hand trembled, and she dropped her phone. She shouted, "Old Shun!" Shenjilia had just finished showering and was drying his hair as he walked out. When he heard Yi Qianqian's voice, he was startled. He looked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian's body was visibly stiff. She turned her head to look at him with obvious fear on her face. "There's someone at home." Shenjilia's heart skipped a beat. He strode forward and looked at the screen on the phone. On the screen, a tall man was standing impressively. The video was paused, and it made people's hair stand on end. Shenjilia looked at the time. It was almost midnight. At this time, for normal office workers, most of them were already asleep. To sneak up at this time, he must be hiding something. Chapter 1868. In the dim image, the stranger looked around, opened the fridge, and took out a drink for himself. It was as if he had entered his own home. His demeanor showed no signs of fear or nervousness. Such a person was either used to such behavior, or he had no fear of the family, or perhaps, he had come prepared, and had no need to worry that Yi Qianqian and I would pose any threat to him. Shenjilia squinted his eyes warily and stared at him with his amber eyes. He watched as the man looked around the living room. After making a full circle, he opened the door to the room and entered it. "Is there a surveillance camera in the room?" Shenjilia asked. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately stood up and replied, "Yes." "Did he enter the room?" She stood up and went over to help adjust the image of the surveillance camera into the room. The moment she did so, she suddenly saw an enlarged face. In the darkness, Yi Qianqian was caught off guard. Her whole body bounced off the wall, and she fell backward. Shenjilia was also startled, but he reacted quickly. He held Yi Qianqian up and stared at the cell phone in his hand. On the screen, the face laughed exaggeratedly. Yi Qianqian exclaimed, "Screenshot! Screenshot!" Shenjilia finally reacted and took a few screenshots of the image. However, The man seemed to be fearless. He grinned and gave the camera the middle finger. Then he opened his mouth and took out a white object to block the camera. When Yi Qianqian saw the scene, the fear in her heart washed over her. She had been relaxed for the whole day, but at that moment, she was extremely tense. Old Shun. Yi Qianqian opened her mouth, but the trembling and fear in her voice could be clearly heard. She sounded like she was about to cry, and it made his heart tighten. Shun Jilya pursed his lips and pressed her into his arms. He said, "Don't be afraid. I think it's best to get your brother-in-law's help on this matter." Li Jinnan was quite famous, and his words carried a lot of weight in the local police station. At this time, if they wanted the police to dispatch the officers as soon as possible, Li Jinnan would be the most suitable person to do so. However, it was already very late. It was hard to say whether he was asleep or not. "Don't be afraid. I'll make the call." Shun Jilya took out his phone and dialed 110 for the police before dialing Li Jinnan's number. Thank God. From the sound of his voice, Li Jinnan was still very energetic. As Shun Jilya summarized the incident, Li Jinnan's frown deepened. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sob softly. She asked, "Will we die? What if that person is a lunatic and wants to kill us?" Shun Jilya was on the phone when he heard Yi Qianqian's fearful words. He frowned and said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. Li San, I'm counting on you. You have a map?" "Yes." "Send it. I'll get someone to issue a wanted order." "All right away." After Shun Jilya hung up the phone, he sent the screenshot to Li Jinnan on WeChat. Third elderly did not reply. After about 20 minutes, Li Jinnan replied, "Waiting for news." How efficient. He realized that the woman in his arms was still trembling. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Don't think about it. Go to sleep." Chapter 1869. Yi Qianqian was really frightened. She had never experienced such a shock since she was young. She had thought that such things could only be seen in novels and comics. She had never imagined that she would actually experience such a thing. When the Arabian Nights that she had once thought was really happening to her. Other than fear, Yi Qianqian didn't feel anything else. Holding Shun Jilya in her arms, Yi Qianqian looked up and asked with trembling eyes, "Aren't you afraid at all?" Of course, Shun Jilya wasn't afraid at all. It was the first time he had encountered such a situation. But at a time like this, no matter how worried or afraid they were, it was useless. "You should be thankful." Shun Jilya sat down and gently stroked her hair. "You should be thankful that we made the prompt decision to move away. If we had stayed there tonight, we might have gotten into trouble." Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Jilya. Yi Qianqian was already scared, and when she heard that, she almost burst into tears. Shun Jilya quickly comforted her and said, "It's a good thing you're not here. Don't go to work tomorrow. It's hard to guarantee that your company's things are still at home. If the criminal sees your business card and goes to your company's address, it'll be no laughing matter." Yi Qianqian suddenly remembered and said, "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If he goes to my company, what will happen to my colleagues?" "Don't be afraid. Your company has security guards, and they do a good job of security. They probably won't let strangers in." As he said that, he sighed with a hint of bitterness. "I've been stopped several times. Why is your company's security guards always changing?" Yi Qianqian relaxed a little and snorted. "Who asked you to look shifty-eyed?" "Shifty-eyed? Have you ever seen a thief or a rat as handsome as me?" Yi Qianqian's lips curled up. She turned her head and pushed him away. "Go away. You're shameless." "How am I shameless? Tell me clearly. Am I not handsome?" "You're not." Yi Qianqian turned her head away with a look of disgust. Her expression was clearly much better than before. When Shun Jilya saw that, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "How could that be? Didn't I use my beauty to attract you here?" "Bah, you're the one who's shameless, okay? No matter what, at least I managed to attract your attention." Shun Jilya pounced on her. "Open your eyes wide and look again. Am I handsome? Not handsome. Not handsome. Not handsome." Yi Qianqian was stubborn. She turned her head away in disgust and struggled with her hands. "You're not being honest. You deserve a spanking." Shun Jilya smacked her butt. Yi Qianqian snorted and took his hand away. "You hit me. Even my father has never hit me before. You've grown up. Your father can't hit you anymore. Your man can. Shen Julia pulled her up and straightened her body. With a mischievous look in his eyes, he said, "If you continue to be stubborn, I'll hit you hard." Yi Qianqian twisted her body, but her brows were still tightly knitted together. She said, "Hey, handsome. I'll let you be handsome for a while." So reluctant? Old Shen, do you think this is the great tribulation that Grandma talked about? When Shen Julia heard Yi Qianqian's words, he felt a little defeated. This guy. He had spent so much effort just to divert her attention. He didn't expect that after going around in a big circle, he would still end up back at the same place. Yi Qianqian didn't seem to notice and asked, "But didn't you say you were 28 years old? Getting married at 28 years old. Getting killed at 28 years old. Everything happened at 28 years old." Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around Shen Julia's neck and said in a small voice, "Old Shen, I'm afraid of death." Chapter 1870. Married at the age of 28. Killed at the age of 28. Killed at the age of 28. Everything happened at the age of 28. Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around Shen Julia's neck and whispered in fear, "Old Shen, I'm afraid of death." Unexpectedly, Shen Julia stared at Yi Qianqian and said in a serious tone, "Don't worry. Beauties are the ones with short lives. People like you can live for a long time." Yi Qianqian's eyes widened when she heard that. She gritted her teeth and reached out to pinch his waist. "Ah!" Shen Julia let out a half-hearted scream. He pinched her little hand and pushed her inside. Then he pinned her down with his foot and said, "Do you still want to sleep? It hurts." Yi Qianqian let go of his hand, but her heart didn't completely relax. She had been extremely sleepy, but now her eyes were wide open, as if she had been injected with steroids. The two of them chatted for a while. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, when Yi Qianqian couldn't stand the sleepiness anymore, and fell asleep. Shen Julia's mood was very heavy, and he didn't feel sleepy at all. Suddenly, Shen Julia's phone vibrated. It was an unknown number calling from Kingstown. He had a bad feeling about this. He glanced at Yi Qianqian, who had finally fallen asleep. He tried to be as gentle as possible, and released her before quietly answering the call. "Is this Mr. Shen?" There was a hubbub of voices on the other end. It sounded a little noisy. The sound of police sirens and walkie-talkies were very clear. Shen Julia breathed a sigh of relief and replied, "Yes. May I know who this is?" "You're from the capital?" the person on the other end said casually. He then returned to the topic at hand and said, "I'm a police officer. My surname is Lin. We are now downstairs from your house. Is it convenient for you to come back now?" At this time, Shen Julia's voice was very low. When he heard that, he subconsciously looked at Yi Qianqian, who had just fallen asleep, and said softly, "Can you briefly describe the situation? My girlfriend just fell asleep. She was scared out of her wits today." On the other end, Officer Lin expressed his understanding. He thought for a moment and said, "We didn't catch them, but the scene was severely damaged. We suspect that they will come back. Now, we need you to confirm the extent of the damage." Shen Julia had expected this, but when he heard this, he couldn't help but feel his heart sink. Yi Qianqian was a simple-minded person. She couldn't help but associate it with the various fortune-telling sessions that had taken place a few days ago. She panicked, and she couldn't help but link it to everything. "I don't think this matter is urgent. Let's go tomorrow," Shen Julia said in a low voice. "That's the only way. It's a bit late now." Officer Lin looked at the time and said, "Then you guys should rest first. Comfort your girlfriend, and try not to let her be alone." "Got it, thank you, Officer Lin." "You're welcome." Shen Julia hung up the phone and quietly walked back. As soon as he lay down, Yi Qianqian reached out and hugged him. Shen Julia's body stiffened, and he turned his head to look. He realized that Yi Qianqian was looking at him with her bright and round eyes. She asked, "Old Shen, did the other side inform you just now?" "Yes, they told us to go there for a while. We'll go there tomorrow." "Has the person been caught?" Yi Qianqian asked. Shen Julia's lips tightened, and he gently shook his head. "No, but we'll be fine here." Chapter 1871. When Yi Qianqian saw Shenjilia's expression, she knew that things weren't as simple as they seemed. However, Yi Qianqian didn't dare to ask again. When she heard that, she hugged Shenjilia tighter. Sleep. Yi Qianqian closed her eyes, but she couldn't fall asleep. After lying in bed for a long time, Shenjilia suddenly said, "Can't sleep?" Yi Qianqian opened her eyes. Her surroundings were dark, but Shenjilia's face was clearly in front of her. "I can't sleep." Yi Qianqian changed her position and stretched. "I'm thinking, am I going to hide like this? If the police can't catch the criminal, won't we have to hide forever and avoid him? How can that be? It's only a matter of time before he gets caught. What if? There are so many drug addicts, robbers, and murderers these days, but they haven't been caught, have they?" The more Yi Qianqian spoke, the more scared she became. Don't be fooled by the serial murderers on TV. There are so many drug dealers and drug lords who have been arrested. In reality, if they weren't caught, would they be broadcasted? Shenjilia was at a loss for words. He reached out and tapped Yi Qianqian on the head with his finger. "What's in your head? Heaven's justice has a long way to go. One day, that person will be brought to justice. But what if? I have to prepare for the worst. That way, when the worst happens, I won't be caught off guard. If I'm prepared, I won't be so afraid, right?" Shenjilia was silent again. After a moment, he said, "Why didn't I realize that you were a pessimist? This is called nipping the problem in the bud. You're worrying for nothing, worrying about nothing." Yi Qianqian wanted to say something else, but Shenjilia quickly covered her mouth and said, "All right, that's enough. Let's go to sleep, shall we? We'll go make preparations early tomorrow and go back to record our statements." "Why do we have to record a statement? We're not the ones who did the bad things. This is a necessary procedure. We still have to find out what exactly our family has lost." Yi Qianqian was already sleepy. When she heard that, she felt even more exhausted. She closed her eyes. "I'll go to sleep then." He had thought that he would be unable to fall asleep for a long time like just now. She didn't know if Shenjilia's words had any effect on her. But the moment she closed her eyes, her mind went blank. Shenjilia breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the sound of even breathing. It was a good thing that she fell asleep, no matter when she fell asleep. Shenjilia closed his eyes and fell asleep with Yi Qianqian in his arms. Shenjilia rarely had dreams, especially nightmares. However, he dreamt of an extremely strange scene. They were on a cliff, and in front of them was a mass of fog. Birds and eagles were chirping around them, and they could vaguely hear the flapping of birds' wings. Shenjilia stood on a high vantage point and looked around, but he was isolated and helpless. Wasn't he sleeping with Yi Qianqian in the hotel? How could he be here? Shenjilia panicked. "Where are you, Yi Qianqian?" However, after the echo reverberated in the surroundings, it disappeared. The eagle's cry grew louder and louder, and Shenjilia's sense of danger multiplied. Suddenly, an angry roar came from behind him. "Jilia, get your ass back here." Chapter 1872. Shenjilia's heart skipped a beat and he shouted, "Grandma!" However, there seemed to be no end to the abyss. Shenjilia didn't even hear the sound of falling. "Old Shen? Old Shen?" He vaguely heard Yi Qianqian's voice. Shenjilia turned around abruptly and saw Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian was standing at the edge of the cliff with a child in her hand. When Yi Qianqian saw Shenjilia, she smiled at him. Shenjilia lowered his head to look at the child beside him, and he couldn't help but look down as well. However, the child was wearing cute plaid suspenders and a white shirt. His small head was topped with a watermelon too long hair. He was short and cute. However, his face could not be seen clearly. His face seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, with a white glow that could easily confuse one's vision. "Old Shun, go home and cook. I haven't eaten yet." Yi Qianqian replied. No one knew what Shenjilia was thinking. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "There's no rice at home." The expression on Yi Qianqian's face changed as she held the child's hand. Suddenly, she turned around in a fit of pique, pulled the child, and pushed him down the cliff. Shenjilia was shocked. He rushed forward and shouted, "Yi Qianqian, what are you doing?" Yi Qianqian didn't say a word. She turned around and threw a punch at Shenjilia. Shenjilia shrank back. He felt something tighten around his ankle. It was as if someone was dragging him. When he looked down, he saw an old, withered and pale hand. Shinjilia was caught off guard, and he was dragged to the ground. Shinjilia suddenly staggered and opened his eyes. When he came to his senses, he was covered in sweat. "Did you have a nightmare?" It was Yi Qianqian's voice. Shinjilia didn't come back to his senses. Once again, he was frightened and turned his head around. Yi Qianqian was looking at him. She looked a little frightened. Her eyes were wide open, and she was still in a state of shock. Shinjilia came back to his senses and let out a long sigh. Yi Qianqian reached out and touched his forehead. Her hand was covered in sweat. He flung his hand in disgust and said, "Dirty." Shinjilia looked around. It was dark. The curtains were not drawn, and the sky outside was already turning bright. It was almost dawn. Shinjilia lay on the bed. He turned his head to look at Yi Qianqian and asked, "You said that you had a strange dream last time. You dreamed that I lost the child. What did it look like exactly?" Yi Qianqian blinked her eyes and asked, "Did you dream about it too?" "Yes, it's very strange. I rarely dream. But when I do, it's almost the same as yours." Shinjilia wiped the sweat from his forehead and sat up. He removed his wet pajamas and said, "Tell me, what did you dream about?" Yi Qianqian thought about it and frowned. After a long time she said, "How would I know? It's been so long. Who would remember it? What did you dream of just now? It's very strange. I feel like I dreamed a lot of things, but I only remember one thing. You lost the child. You're the one who lost the child." Shinjilia tapped her forehead. "Why did you lose the child? When did I? Bah, don't even think about blaming me." Shinjilia laughed out loud. "You finally understand how I felt at that time, don't you? Did you see the child's face?" Yi Qianqian suddenly asked. Shinjilia's smile faded, and he shook his head gently. Chapter 1873. She rubbed the goosebumps on her arms and asked, "Do you think that God is trying to foretell us something?" Yi Qianqian felt her hair stand on end. She rubbed the goosebumps on her arms and asked, "Do you think that God is trying to tell us something?" "Bah." Shinjilia smiled helplessly. "I think it's possible that it's because you told me about it the last time. That's why I dreamed about it. As the saying goes, what you think in the day, you dream at night. If that was the case, there was still a basis for it." "Is that so?" Yi Qianqian felt that it made sense. "Sai, how can you live a good life every day? Go to sleep. It's nothing." Shinjilia held her in his arms and said, "You can only have children when your body is well. Don't stay up late." "I didn't want to either." "Oh, old Shun, you scared me just now." Shinjilia raised his eyebrows and asked, "I was talking in my sleep too." Yi Qianqian curled up in his arms and said, "You keep calling me Grandma and Yi Qianqian. I can't shake you awake no matter how hard I try." "Is it that exaggerated?" Shinjilia thought it was funny, and he began to think about it. He had always been a light sleeper, and he didn't expect that there would be a time like this. "Yeah." Yi Qianqian nodded her head profusely. "You have no idea how many times I called out to you. But you wouldn't wake up no matter how hard I pinched you. What did you call me?" "Huh." Yi Qianqian was a little confused and couldn't react in time. "You said you called me a few times. What did you call me?" "Old Shun," Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. "That's what I've always called you." Shinjilia nodded his head and replied, "Yes, I understand." "Ah. In psychology, these are all explainable. There is a popular saying that it is psychological. Coupled with the influence of the environment, dreaming is very normal." "What do you mean?" "To put it simply, I'm dreaming because I'm infected by you." F***CK. How can this be? That's how it is." Shinjilia hugged her and pressed her head. "Sleep. Oh, all right." Not long after Yi Qianqian closed her eyes, her cell phone, which was charging on the bedside table, suddenly rang. It was Shinjilia's phone. It was an unknown number with a Kingstown landline number. When Yi Qianqian saw it, she asked, "Is it that cop again?" Shinjilia didn't think it was possible. He took a look and said, "It's probably a harassment call." He pressed the silent button on his phone and put it back. But after a while, after the call was automatically hung up, the phone rang again. It was the same phone call. "Answer it." What if it's something important? Yi Qianqian asked. Shenjulia looked at the time. It was barely 5 in the morning. Picking up the phone, he could hear the howling of the wind on the other side. Hello, Shenjulia replied. Suddenly, a laugh came from the other side of the phone. It was a strange voice. I'm not very good, Dr. Shen. Since you dare to call the police, I can only give you a big gift. Shenjulia had turned on the loudspeaker, so Yi Qianqian could hear him clearly. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat, and she began to tremble in fear. Just as she was about to speak, Shenjulia covered her mouth. Shenjulia used his eyes to warn her to be quiet and asked in a calm voice, What do you want? Chapter 1874. You want money? Shenjulia asked directly, but in his heart, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If this person dared to contact him, there was a way to catch him. What he was most afraid of was that if he didn't come, it would cause panic. Ha ha ha, I'm not stupid. If I wanted money, wouldn't you wait for someone to come and catch me? The man laughed. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like a stone scraping the sand. Then what do you want? Ha, I want powder. Without a doubt, the powder was referring to drugs. I don't have such things, Shenjulia said righteously. If you want money, I can give it to you, as long as you don't pester us in the future. But if you want powder, you have to get it yourself. I don't have such connections. You don't? The man seemed to sigh. His throat seemed to be broken. Then I'll have to go after your girlfriend, Dr. Shen. Shenjulia's brows were tightly knitted together. When he heard that, he sneered and said, Do you even have the chance? The man seemed to be quiet for a moment. I'm with my girlfriend every day. If you want to do anything, you have to go through me. I have police protection around me. Who do you think you are? There was a hint of provocation in his words. Yi Qianqian was frightened when she heard that. She gently tugged at Shenjulia. There was an indescribable nervousness in her eyes. Shenjulia shook his head gently and gestured for her to calm down. The man chuckled, but before he could speak, Shenjulia spoke again. When the time comes, we'll have to see if you can endure it or if I can. Since you're calling me now, it means that you're at the end of your rope. There are wanted posters everywhere. And your photo has already been published. You're already starting to feel nervous. You can only turn to me for help now if you don't want to suffer so much. An addict was undoubtedly terrifying. But what was even more terrifying was an addict who had no other way out. To catch a snake at its weakest point, Shenjulia's every word hit the nail on the head. No wonder you're a psychiatrist. You're right. But I have to warn you, if I don't want to live anymore, I can easily kill 1 or 2 of you. Bring it on any time. Shenjulia's tone seemed very relaxed, but Yi Qianqian could clearly see his tightly knitted brows. His heartbeat quickened uncontrollably. Yi Qianqian grabbed Shenjulia's hand and didn't dare to make a sound. As long as you can endure it, believe it or not, as soon as you go out, people will recognize you everywhere. At that time, you won't even be able to eat, let alone make the powder. Are you threatening me? We wouldn't dare. Our lives are still in your hands. Hee hee. Zhang Xian chuckled coldly. His laughter was filled with obvious anger. You sure have guts. I'm not as old as you. Do you really think that no one is monitoring our phones and waiting for your call? How dare you? The man's voice was filled with anger and panic. Shenjulia laughed. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a joke. Yi Qianqian was scared out of her wits. Her body was trembling. She almost thought that what he said was true. She hadn't even been able to relax when she heard the bad news. The upheaval in her mood made Yi Qianqian feel terrible. The person on the other side of the phone was also flustered and exasperated. He roared, Bastard. Shenjulia didn't respond and waited for him to continue. Chapter 1875. The warning voice, coupled with the whistling sound of the wind coming from the other side of the phone, was indescribably terrifying. Shenjulia wasn't frightened. He teased, My woman will go? His voice seemed to be chuckling. The man hadn't expected Shenjulia to have such an attitude. For a moment, he didn't know what he meant. Shenjulia's tone was unhurried as he said, My woman is timid. If she's not careful, she might call the police or something. Or she might accidentally give you up. Do you think you're the one at a disadvantage, or am I? What do you want? I'll go. You said it yourself. I'm bold. TSK. The man looked disdainful. If I find out you're up to no good, I won't let you off. Haha. All right, I'll wait and see. With that, Shenjulia hung up the phone. Yi Qianqian was right beside him. She knew very well that he wasn't as relaxed as he made it sound. When he put down the phone, Shenjulia's palms were already covered in a layer of sweat. There were also beads of sweat on his forehead. Hot tears welled up in Yi Qianqian's eyes as she asked, Old Shun, are you really going? Yes, I'm going. Shenjulia nodded slightly and kissed Yi Qianqian on the forehead. Don't be afraid. It'll be fine. How can I not be afraid? Yi Qianqian burst into tears and hugged Shenjulia's waist. You scared me to death. How can you act so well? You're obviously very nervous, but you still speak as if nothing happened. It's like you're suffering from schizophrenia. Shenjulia couldn't help but laugh. He nodded at her head and said, What kind of description is that? Do you sound like you're praising me? Yeah. Yi Qianqian's face was already wet with tears. She wiped her eyes hard and sobbed. Why don't I go? If a woman goes alone, he might let his guard down. No. Shenjulia's attitude was very firm. I'll go. You saw it for yourself. I can act. Can you? Yi Qianqian was speechless. She couldn't. She couldn't at all. Her mental fortitude was obviously not as good as Shenjulia's. She might be paralyzed when she arrived at the scene. Shenjulia looked at her and suddenly turned to face her. He held her face in his hands and kissed her on the lips. Yi Qianqian felt even more afraid. Her breathing became heavier. She pushed him away and cried out, No, don't go. Yi Qianqian was shocked. Shenjulia was caught off guard by her push, and his hands went to the back of his head. Don't go. She curled into a ball helplessly and said, I'm so scared. I think we're going to get into trouble. Old Shen, can you not go? Shenjulia hugged her and comforted her softly. It's okay. It's okay. We're just going to buy something. Don't be afraid. Old Shen. Yi Qianqian suddenly looked up. Her face was wet. Do you love me? Shenjulia looked at Yi Qianqian and said with certainty, Yes, Yi Qianqian. I love you very, very much, so I can't lose you. Don't be afraid. I'll be fine. Yi Qianqian sniffled and threw herself into his arms. She tried to calm herself down, but it was useless. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. She whimpered, What should I do, Shenjulia? I love you very, very much too, but don't go. I beg you, don't go. Shenjulia didn't agree, but he didn't disagree either. Chapter 1876. How can I possibly fall asleep now? Yi Qianqian was about to go crazy. She grabbed Shenjulia and said, Old Shen, don't worry about this. I think he's been bullying us, because we give him the impression that we're easy targets. As long as we're not afraid of him, he won't be able to do anything to us. You, Qianqian. Shenjulia interrupted her. Yi Qianqian's frightened eyes were filled with tears. She looked at Shenjulia with confusion and helplessness. Shenjulia comforted her and said, It'll be fine. But, no buts. Shenjulia gently patted her on the back. My grandmother said that I'll definitely live to be 100 years old. Your grandmother can be very unreliable at times. Yi Qianqian retorted reflexively. Shenjulia sighed heavily. What do you want me to do with you? You refused to believe my grandmother's good words. Instead, you believe the bad ones without a doubt. I didn't. You didn't? Think about it carefully. Did you? Yi Qianqian was speechless. Shenjulia looked at her and said, It'll be fine. I'll call the police to inform them. Call the police? Yi Qianqian was shocked. If that person finds out, won't he take revenge on us? He'll take revenge on us even if we don't call the police. Shenjulia stared at her. Don't believe the words of that kind of person. If he dares to do anything to us, it's only a matter of time. We'll call the police to nip it in the bud. However, if we want to arrest him, we'll have to catch him like a turtle in a jar. What are you thinking? Yi Qianqian felt even more uneasy. Shenjulia glanced at her and didn't answer. After calling Officer Lin, Shenjulia and Yi Qianqian soon met up with them. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and Kong Cheng was still asleep. Officer Lin had been busy with work and hadn't slept all night. Shen Jilia and Yi Qianqian were the same. After sending someone to buy breakfast, Officer Lin brought them to a secluded room in the station. Officer Lin, I need your cooperation. Officer Lin glanced at Yi Qianqian, who was obviously frightened, and nodded. Tell me what happened. I'll make the arrangements later. I don't need it today. Just take care of her for me. Shen Jilia glanced at Yi Qianqian. I'll go there myself. I'm guessing this person wants to meet me twice. We can do this. Yi Qianqian finished her breakfast as if she was chewing wax. Shen Jilia coaxed her to sleep on the sofa in the police station. With her head resting on Shen Jilia's lap, Yi Qianqian quickly fell asleep. By the time he woke up, it was already noon. Yi Qianqian stood up abruptly and walked out. There were many people in uniform outside. When the police officers saw Yi Qianqian, they were obviously a little surprised. Yi Qianqian shouted, Shen Jilia. Such a voice attracted the attention of many people. A policewoman walked up and said, he went out to buy lunch for the time being. Don't worry. Yi Qianqian breathed a sigh of relief and asked, how long has he been gone? Just now. Let me tell you when you wake up. What about Officer Lin? Yi Qianqian felt that something was amiss. The policewoman was stunned for a moment and quickly replied, he's off duty. Yi Qianqian's heart sank. She turned around and went back into the room to wait for Shen Jilia to return. But the wait went on for an hour. Chapter 1877. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but look at the policewoman. Where did he go? The policewoman couldn't answer. She looked at Yi Qianqian and smiled. Yi Qianqian's heart suddenly sank. Kingstown was an old city. Streets and alleys intersected. And there were all kinds of small roads in the urban villages. There was a small road on one of the old streets called Songyan South Street. Shen Jilia followed the GPS and walked over. He searched for a while and saw a chess stall. A few white-haired old men were sitting there with a big parasol on top. Beside them were old people riding bicycles. The 5 old men looked to be in their 50s or 60s. One of them was wearing a sweatshirt and holding a fan. His legs were spread apart, and he was enjoying the cool air. Another was playing chess. Pa, I'll eat you. The old man's old and energetic voice was filled with excitement and laughter. Shen Jilia walked up to take a look. He looked at one of the old men and said softly, business. The old man's smile froze. He turned to look at Shen Jilia and sized him up. Shen Jilia's lips were red, and his face was pale. Although there were some dark circles under his eyes, it wasn't to the extent that he was doing business. He didn't think it was a business. The old man pretended not to know and asked, what's that? Business, Shen Jilia repeated. Shen Jilia repeated himself. He picked up his phone and opened WeChat. He sent a message to a new friend he had just added. Soon a call came in. Shen Jilia picked up the phone and handed it to the old man. The criminal was obviously very familiar with the old man. The old man sized him up and said something over the phone. After a series of and os, the old man tapped the phone with his fan and typed a few words on WeChat before returning the phone to Shen Jilia. Shen Jilia understood. He put the phone in his pocket and walked in step by step. There were many people inside, and there were children running and playing at the entrance. Shen Jilia walked in and saw a child. He asked, little boy, are there any adults here? The child wasn't afraid of strangers. He smiled and pointed behind him. Shen Jilia walked in and saw an open door. Shen Jilia strode in. A middle-aged woman who looked to be in her 30s or 40s had dark skin, and her hair was tied up. She looked Shen Jilia up and down and asked, what are you doing here? Business, Shen Jilia repeated. The woman asked, who wants it? Him. Shen Jilia took out his phone and showed her his WeChat. On WeChat was the page that the old man had just sent. The woman took a look and said, 5,000. Shen Jilia had no concept of that, but he did bring a lot of money with him. Hearing this, he took out the money, counted 5,000 yuan, and handed it to her. After the woman verified its authenticity, she took out a small white bag the size of 2 fingers from the interlayer of the table. That's it. Shen Jilia looked at it and frowned. The woman sneered. Is this your first time buying? You'll get used to it after a few more times. Get lost and be careful on your way. Why is his attitude so bad? Shinjilia still didn't say a word. He put the things in his pocket and walked out. Before he left the alley, he received another call from an unknown number. It was another landline. That person was looking for a landline to call him. Shinjilia was already used to it. When he answered the call, he heard the unpleasant voice on the other end. Come out. I'm coming out. Chapter 1878. Shinjilia did as he was told. When he walked out, he saw the group of old men. Those people glanced at Shinjilia in unison, and then ignored him. Shinjilia walked to the left. After looking around, he quickened his pace. His heart tightened. This person probably wanted to settle things in one go. Shinjilia didn't hang up. He asked, Are you here to get something? Why are you asking that? Just keep walking. Shinjilia lowered his head and kept walking. Turn right. An unpleasant, hoarse voice commanded Shinjilia to go in that direction. Shinjilia had already guessed that the person must be nearby and watching him. But where was he? He looked around, but didn't find anything strange. What are you looking at? Turn right. Shinjilia did as he was told. He narrowed his eyes in thought. This guy must be somewhere high up. He raised his head and looked around. Nothing. However, there was a building that used reflective glass. It was a small villa. Don't tell me it's in here. Turn left. The unpleasant voice came again. Shinjilia's heart skipped a beat. Not only did he not turn left, but he dodged to the right. The man was angry and said, I told you to turn left. Where are you going? Shinjilia walked even faster and said, If you want something, come and get it from me. The man was exasperated. In a moment, Shinjilia could clearly hear the sound of something smashing coming from the other side of the phone. Damn it, you're asking for it. Believe it or not, I'll kill your woman. You'll have to have the chance first, Shinjilia snorted. You're the first person I've ever met to be so arrogant when you're asking for help. There was no sound coming from the other side. Shinjilia could clearly hear the wind whistling and the sound of friction. There was no doubt that the man had started to run. Shinjilia's heart sank. After a few turns, he came to a small alley where there was a small grocery store. He asked for a bottle of white wine and a lighter. He left $100 on the counter and quickly moved forward. Shinjilia opened the bottle as he walked. His footsteps were fast. Behind him, he heard the sound of rapid footsteps. Shinjilia heard it clearly. He jumped to the side and whipped his head around. However, it was the girl from the convenience store. The young lady was taken aback by Shinjilia's sudden outburst and replied sheepishly, Give me my change. No need. Shinjilia turned around and looked as if he was about to run. The young lady felt that he was a little strange. It's a few dozen yuan, and he doesn't want it anymore? It was as if he was running for his life. As he muttered to himself, a black shadow dashed out from behind him. His face was ferocious, and he looked a little scary. The little girl was startled and ran to the side. The figure didn't pay any attention to her, and continued to charge straight at Shinjilia. When Shinjilia heard the voice behind him, his heart sank, and he ran even faster. Stop right there. A hoarse and unpleasant voice rang out. With a bottle of white wine in his arms, Shinjilia gritted his teeth and ran toward the intersection. I told you to stop. When he heard the footsteps behind him, Shinjilia cursed under his breath. Idiot. A very low-level person, a cornered drug addict. He had actually been frightened by such a person for an entire night? Shinjilia ran to the intersection in a few steps. He turned around abruptly, opened the lid of the bottle of white wine, and splashed it forward. Chapter 1879. The man hadn't expected such a thing to happen. He took a step back in fright. Then, he was hit by the fire. Ah! The man screamed, but he didn't forget his original intention. He lunged at Shinjilia. Shinjilia dodged and kicked him. Then he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. The criminal was surrounded. He could clearly hear the sound of guns being loaded. With a horrified expression, the drug addict fell to the ground. He put out the fire on his body, but his head was pressed against the gun. He stared at Shinjilia with hatred and gritted his teeth. King played me. Shinjilia was already covered in sweat. When he heard that, he laughed coldly. But his heart was indescribably relaxed. South Songyan Street was swept. A total of 15 people were arrested. It was already afternoon when he returned to the police station. Before Shen Jiliya entered, he could already hear Yi Qianqian's footsteps in the distance. When she saw Shen Jiliya, Yi Qianqian burst into tears. She lunged at him and cried without holding back. Officer Lin saw it and found it funny. His heart ached. He patted Shen Jiliya on the shoulder and said, "Your girlfriend was scared. Comfort her." Shen Jiliya's heart softened. He hugged Yi Qianqian tighter and said softly, "It's okay. Don't cry. There are so many people watching." Yi Qianqian felt even more wronged. She bit his shoulder. Shen Jiliya cried out in pain and said, "It's over. It's over. Are you trying to murder your husband?" Yi Qianqian bit him even harder. After sobbing a few times, she pushed him away and strode out of the police station. Shen Jiliya saw that something was wrong. He quickly chased after her and comforted her. "I've caught that person. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Are you surprised? Are you touched?" Yi Qianqian's mouth twitched. She cried again. Shen Jiliya was frightened. He quickly hugged her and comforted her. All right. Don't cry. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was really wrong." Yi Qianqian hugged him and sobbed angrily. "Why didn't you tell me that you were going to die? If I woke up to the news that you were killed by someone on the side of the road, what would I do in the future?" "I'm fine, aren't I?" Shen Jiliya said helplessly. "Besides, how can you curse your boyfriend like that?" All right, stop crying." Yi Qianqian didn't want to cry either, but the grievances were overwhelming. Her eyes were swollen like two walnuts, and she couldn't stop crying. Shen Jiliya felt helpless and said softly, "Shall we go home first?" "No, I'm going to a hotel." Shen Jiliya laughed and pulled her along. "Let's go." Yi Qianqian felt that it was the longest 2 days of her life. After these 2 days, he became especially happy at other times. After staying in the hotel for a few days, they started to move. The small house was listed as a second-hand house. Yi Qianqian and Shen Jiliya moved all their belongings to their new home. The police officers presented Shen Jiliya with a silk banner. On it were 2 rows of words: "Courageous Good Samaritan, Outstanding Citizen." The words were pompous and simple. Yi Qianqian threw it under the bed in disgust. When Shen Jiliya asked about it, Yi Qianqian replied with 2 words: "Throw it away." Shen Jiliya was helpless. After the matter was settled, the people in the capital started to give him bad news. Chapter 1880. Shen Jiliya was stunned when he heard the news. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. When he turned to look at Yi Qianqian, he saw the woman laughing heartily. "I see." Shen Jiliya spoke to his colleague on the phone and sighed. "It's my fault. It's my fault. Tell the director that I'll go back once I'm done here." When his colleague heard that, he flew into a rage and said, "You rascal! Do you know how many things have been going on in the hospital recently? You haven't even F***king finished dealing with them. I haven't even F***king waited for you to F***king finish dealing with those trivial matters on your side. And all of us will be done for. Do you know how busy we've been lately?" The speaker was on, and Shen Jiliya could almost hear the saliva on the other end of the line. After a moment of silence, he said, "You should at least give me some time. The director said that if you don't come back soon, he'll deduct all your bonuses. You'll lose your promotion bonus and your year-end bonus. I don't care if you're a relative of the royal family. It's useless to ask your father for help." What a vicious statement. The total sum of the bonuses was not a small figure. Shen Jiliya couldn't stand it anymore. Hey, you can't be so unkind. I still have a wife and child to support." Yi Qianqian sat up and threw a pillow at him. Shen Jiliya caught it firmly. The other end of the line was silent. After a long time, he said, "So what if you're in a relationship? I'll tell the director to deduct all your bonuses." Hey, the call had already been hung up. Shen Jiliya had no choice but to turn to look at Yi Qianqian, who was sitting on the bed. He threw the phone aside and pounced on her. "How dare you laugh at me?" Yi Qianqian screamed and shrank back. Then, she let out a peal of laughter that was loud enough to pierce through the ceiling. "It tickles." Shen Jiliya's hands groped her body and pressed down hard. He snorted and said, You deserve to be punished. Yi Qianqian groaned. She was soon out of breath from the punishment. The swaying of the bed became more and more joyful as time passed. When he returned to the capital, Shun Jilia dealt with all the work that had been delayed. Fortunately, the old director was kind enough. Although he had been demoted, there was still a mountain of work to be done. In the words of his colleagues, "You deserve it." Shun Jilia had no choice but to bitterly finish his work during the day. When he got home at night, he called his girlfriend to complain. To Shun Jilia's surprise, not only was his year-end bonus not deducted, but it was also increased by quite a bit. After receiving the reward, Shun Jilia glanced at the old director. While Amos snorted, "If you bring your girlfriend to the imperial capital and run off to Connecticut to work again, I'll fire you." Shun Jilia laughed out loud and half-heartedly gave a military salute. "Yes, sir." 4 months was neither a long time nor a short time. The weather turned cold, and the nights in the capital grew longer. The end of the year was approaching. 2 days before the holidays, Shun Jilia made a special trip to Kingstown. After that, he went to Yuntown with Yi Qianqian. The weather in Yuntown was quite warm. When they arrived, Yi Zhenhua was wearing a cotton-padded jacket and sitting in the living room, watching TV and drinking tea. "Dad," Yi Qianqian called out as she dragged her luggage into the room. "Uncle." Shun Jilia exhaled a breath of cold air, but his smile was bright. "Happy New Year." Chapter 1881. Yi Qianqian took off her scarf and stuck out her tongue when she heard that. "How did you know?" I'm your father." Although he said that, he still took the things from her hand and said, "Have a cup of tea. It's freshly brewed." He covered Yi Qianqian's hand and frowned. "Ouch, it's cold. Why didn't you wear more?" "I wore more. Look at how swollen I am." Yi Qianqian raised her hand. Sure enough, it was swollen. Yi Zhenhua frowned and handed her a cup of tea. "Drink it. It'll warm you up." Yi Qianqian took it and drank it in one gulp. "Ah, it's delicious." She turned to look at Shun Jilia and picked up another cup. "You drink it too." Shun Jilia took it and drank it in one gulp. "Good tea." Yi Qianqian smiled and put the cup down. Yi Zhenhua was unhappy and said with a sour tone, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. She doesn't even treat your father that well." "Hey Dad, didn't you just drink it?" Yi Qianqian asked Yi Zhenhua to sit down. "Sit down. We're going out to eat today. Don't cook for yourself. It's such a cold day." "Humph." Yi Zhenhua glanced at Yi Qianqian and then looked at Shun Jilia. "When do you plan to get married?" Shun Jilia touched his nose and said, "It'll probably be a while. We didn't do it before. We'll have to wait until Qianqian is 28. Yi Qianqian rarely communicated with her father, so they didn't tell Yi Zhenhua about her fortune-telling with the blind uncle. Naturally, he didn't know about it. Yi Zhenhua wasn't surprised when he heard that. He nodded and said, "It's good that your relationship is good. Don't be together for so many years. You won't be able to wait until Qianqian is 28. Yi Qianqian was unhappy when she heard that. She rebuked, "Dad, are you cursing me?" Yi Zhenhua stood up and looked at the time. "It's getting late. If we're going out to eat, let's hurry. It'll be even colder when it rains." The weather in Yuntown hadn't been good recently. When they heard that, they didn't waste any more time. They grabbed their bags and headed out. Yi Zhenhua had ordered all of Yi Qianqian's favorites. In the end, she symbolically waved the menu in front of Shun Jilia as a sign of asking for his opinion. Yi Qianqian wanted to laugh, but she shrank back when Yi Zhenhua glared at her. Yi Zhenhua had the habit of making tea after a meal. After dinner, he returned home, boiled a pot of water, and sat in front of the tea tray. "Shun, come and sit for a while." Shun Jilia didn't know what to do at first. When he heard this, he walked over and sat down in front of Yi Zhenhua. Yi Zhenhua skillfully washed and brewed the tea. His movements were smooth and graceful. He glanced at Shun Jilia and asked, "Shun, does your family not like our Qianqian very much?" Shun Jilia glanced at Yi Qianqian when he heard that. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she moved a stool over and sat down. Yi Zhenhua snorted and looked at his daughter. "What are you doing?" "I wanted to drink some tea." Yi Qianqian found a random excuse and picked up a cup of tea. She almost scalded herself. "Don't be so rash," Yi Jianhua rebuked her. But he still took the cup from her. "Drink it when it's cold." As he spoke, he looked at Shen Jilie and asked, "Does your grandmother not like our Qianqian very much?" Chapter 1882. Yi Jianhua sipped his tea and said slowly, "I know that you suffered at your hands before." As he spoke, he glanced at Shen Jilie. "I heard that the old lady in your family treats my Yu very badly. I don't expect her to treat my Qianqian very well. However, you'd better protect my little girl. In the past, I was always worried that she couldn't find a partner. Now, I'm worried that she'll be bullied by your family." He sighed and looked at Yi Qianqian. Exasperated with her failure to live up to his expectations, he said, "Can't you just let me worry a little less?" Yi Qianqian felt a little wronged and replied, "You're the one who's worried. What does that have to do with me?" Yi Jianhua glared at her, but his face was full of helplessness. "Sigh. Don't worry, uncle." Shen Jilie looked at Yi Jianhua and said seriously, "No matter what, taking good care of Qianqian is my first duty. I'll take care of my grandmother. Even if Qianqian can't marry me now, I can wait. It's only a year or so. After that, we'll spend the rest of our lives together. Between us, it doesn't matter whether we have this certificate or not." Yi Qianqian nodded her head in approval. When Yi Jianhua heard this, he didn't know what to feel. He snorted and said, "You better be telling the truth. If you dare to bully my daughter, I'll go to the capital with a knife and chop you up." Shen Jilie grinned, revealing his rosy lips and pearly white teeth. "Then you won't get the chance. You have a sharp tongue." Although Yi Jianhua said so, a smile bloomed on his face. He seemed to be in a good mood. After chatting with the elders in the living room, Yi Jianhua soon felt sleepy. After they left, the weather was a little cold, and Yi Qianqian didn't feel like showering. She took off her coat and lay on the bed, refusing to get up. The two of them had been separated for 4 to 5 months, and Shen Jilie had been busy in the capital. The feeling of a long-distance relationship was really not a good one. More importantly, Shen Jilie had gone to fetch Yi Qianqian from Kingstown to Yintown the moment he landed. He hadn't had the time to be affectionate with her. Now that the trip was over, Shen Jilie couldn't help but start groping her. Yi Qianqian twisted and whispered, "The soundproofing here is terrible. Don't touch me." "It's okay, I'll be gentle. Bah, we'll talk about it tomorrow. What's the rush?" Yi Qianqian kicked him away and hugged herself tightly. She refused to let go. Shen Jilie was actually a little hesitant, but when he thought about how he had to leave a good impression on his future father-in-law, he gritted his teeth and agreed. But who would have thought that clenching his teeth like that would cause him to be unable to sleep for the entire night? When Shen Jilie woke up the next day, he looked dispirited and listless. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she lowered her head and pretended not to know anything. After eating the breakfast prepared by Yi Jianhua, Yi Qianqian suddenly had the sudden urge to visit Fang Tongtong. Shen Jilie knew that Yi Qianqian couldn't let it go, so he didn't stop her. However, when they arrived at Fang Tongtong's shop, they realized that the shopkeeper was Fang Tongtong's mother. When Fang Tongtong's mother saw Yi Qianqian and Shen Jilie, she felt a little conflicted. "You're back." Yi Qianqian nodded her head and looked inside before asking, "Where's Tongtong?" Tongtong went to Thailand for a vacation. As she spoke, she took out a stool from inside. Sit for a while." Chapter 1883. Oh. Mrs. Fang nodded and looked at Yi Qianqian and Shen Jilie. There were a few emotions in her eyes that Yi Qianqian couldn't understand. After staring at them for a while, Mrs. Fang smiled and said, "Thank you, Qianqian." Yi Qianqian was stunned. "Thank you for being willing to come and see our Tongtong." Mrs. Fang looked at Yi Qianqian. Although she was smiling, her eyes were already red. "Some time ago, I was the one who spread those rumors. I know that our Tongtong likes your boyfriend." Mrs. Fang spoke in a dialect, so Shen Jilie didn't really understand. But seeing their reactions, he could almost imagine that they were talking about him. Yi Qianqian didn't answer, and just looked at her. Mrs. Fang forced a smile and said, "So, I wanted to ruin your relationship and exaggerate the matter a little. Then, everyone in town would know that Tong Tong was bullied by you. Yi Qianqian was silent and didn't say anything. But I didn't expect that my daughter would be defiled by that beast. When the court heard the verdict, they said that the man was mentally ill and couldn't be sentenced. They just locked him up in a mental hospital, but he drove my daughter crazy. Mrs. Fong cried out and looked at Yi Qianqian. In the first month, Tong Tong almost committed suicide. Yi Qianqian was stunned. She didn't know about this at all. Fortunately, I found out in time. Otherwise, I might have lost my daughter. Mrs. Fong wiped her tears and sobbed as she said, I know I went overboard in the past, but Tong Tong has already been bullied so badly. She didn't have many friends since she was young, and she has always treated you as her best friend. You know how she and I have treated you all these years. During this period of time, Tong Tong has always been very regretful. She thinks that you are still her good friend, but she doesn't have the face to look for you. I beg you, Qianqian, forgive our Tong Tong, okay? Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. She took out a tissue from her bag and handed it to her. Mrs. Fong took it and looked at Yi Qianqian, then at Shen Jilia. Your boyfriend is really good. I know that Tong Tong was just momentarily possessed. Qianqian, don't be calculative with her, okay? Yi Qianqian had never been a cold-hearted person. Seeing an elder cry like this in front of her, her heart was like a cup of tea that had been steeped for a long time, and it was suffused with bitterness. I understand, Yi Qianqian whispered. He stretched out his hand to wipe away her tears, feeling a little sorry for her. Fong Tong Tong wasn't a bad person. Yi Qianqian knew better than anyone else. Hearing this, Mrs. Fong raised her head, and tears rolled down her cheeks again. She nodded and said, Qianqian, that's great. Qianqian, it's the new year. Can you give Tong Tong a call? After that, Mrs. Fong seemed to realize that her request might be a little too much, so she awkwardly added, It's the new year, and she's alone in Thailand. I'm a little worried. If you don't want to call her, that's fine too. Alright, don't cry, Yi Qianqian said softly. It's the new year. Be happy. Mrs. Fong smiled happily and nodded. Yi Qianqian was not in a good mood, but at the same time, she was in a good mood. Chapter 1884. After all, they had been friends for so many years, and Fong Tong Tong had encountered such an incident. However, he still felt that something was wrong. Mrs. Fong's words might have given her a legitimate reason. Although Shen Jilia didn't understand what they were saying, he could roughly guess what they were talking about. On the way to the airport, he saw Yi Qianqian staring at her cell phone in a daze. He sighed softly and said, If you want to call, just do it. Yi Qianqian glanced at Shen Jilia, and suddenly felt a little sad. Shen Jilia hated Fong Tong Tong so much, yet he allowed her to make a phone call? It would take them more than 10 minutes to reach the airport. Yi Qianqian thought for a moment and dialed Fong Tong Tong's number. It rang for a while before the call was picked up. Hello, Qianqian. It was Fong Tong Tong's voice. However, compared to his previous flamboyant and enthusiastic voice, his voice now seemed a little cautious. It seemed to be a test, as if he didn't dare to believe it. She then said, Tong Tong, Happy New Year. Fong Tong Tong had been in Thailand for a few days. Intermittently, a few people came to wish her Happy New Year. However, no one could say such a simple blessing to make her feel so moved to tears. Fong Tong Tong felt a lump in her throat. For a long time, she was unable to speak. Hearing the silence on the other side, after a long time, he finally said, You too. Fong Tong Tong did not say anything else, but in that instant, a smile spread across her lips. How nice. She hung up the phone and looked out the window. It was drizzling outside. The weather this year was not good, and it was wet everywhere. However, his mood was inexplicably better. Shen Jilia glanced at her, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. It was already evening when they arrived at the imperial capital. Mrs. Shen had been waiting outside the departure lounge for a long time. When she saw Shen Jilia and Yi Qianqian walking out chatting and laughing, a smile blossomed on her face. She rushed forward to Yi Qianqian's side and said, Qianqian, you're finally here again. Auntie missed you so much. Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed and called out, Auntie, did he tell you that I was coming today? He was, of course, referring to Shinjulia. Of course, this was a matter of course. Mrs. Shin smiled and said, yes, he suddenly applied for leave and went to Kingstown. I guessed that he must be with you. After asking around, I found out that he was indeed coming back. That's why I thought that he must be picking you up. Don't feel pressured. I just miss you and want to talk to you. She looked around and asked, are you the only one here? That's right. Yi Qianqian was a little flattered. No, your uncle is here. Mrs. Shun looked around and finally found Shun Longyue in the crowd. There he is. Shun Longyue was on the phone from behind. He walked over while talking on the phone. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and had a smile on his face. He looked quite kind. Yi Qianqian felt a little nervous. She turned around and gave Shinjulia a reproachful look. Didn't we agree to come secretly? Didn't he say that he would let her prepare herself and that his family would give her a heads up before she went over to their house to give her New Year greetings? This was different from what they had agreed on. Shinjulia felt a little innocent and said, I didn't know either. I'm innocent too. Yi Qianqian had the urge to slap him to death. She felt increasingly nervous. Chapter 1885. She had already been caught by her parents. How could she sneak into a hotel? Yi Qianqian reluctantly allowed herself to be dragged into the car. Then, she reluctantly followed them to the Shun residence. However, no matter how reluctant Yi Qianqian was, she had to put on a cheerful expression. The weather in the capital was very cold. The surrounding flowers, trees, and other greenery were all bare. Ice that had yet to melt hung from the branches. Even with festive lanterns hung, it still felt very monotonous. It was cold. Unlike the damp and cold in the south, the capital was so cold that it made one's mouth dry. Fortunately, there was a heater in the car, so Yi Qianqian was able to sit comfortably. As soon as she arrived at the Shun residence, she saw old Mrs. Shun sitting inside as expected. Old Mrs. Shun was twirling a prayer bead in her hand. The bead was engraved with complicated Sanskrit characters. She was dressed in 2 black qipao dresses with dark red embroidery. Her short white hair fell past her ears. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she couldn't help but take a second look. You're back. Old Mrs. Shun sat on the sofa without moving. She glanced at Shinjulia and said, You only know how to scare people away. You just went to Kingstown yesterday, and you're back today. I thought you were going to spend the new year in Kingstown. Shinjulia dragged his luggage and said with a smile, How could I? I still want to spend the new year with Grandma. I'm afraid it's not just me. Old Mrs. Shun glanced at Yi Qianqian meaningfully. Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward and greeted, Hello, Grandma. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. Nanny he, go and prepare a guest room for her. Nanny he was a little embarrassed. She looked at Shinjulia, meaning to ask for his opinion. Shinjulia replied, What's the point? Just sleep with me. No. Yi Qianqian felt even more awkward. Let's just sleep in the guest room. Otherwise I can go and stay in a hotel. What hotel? Old Mrs. Shun's attitude was a little arrogant. She glanced at Yi Qianqian and said, Those who don't know might think that I'm mistreating my grandson's girlfriend. Yi Qianqian was speechless. She laughed dryly, feeling extremely awkward. When Shinjulia saw that, he was a little displeased and said, Grandma, why do you have such unpleasant words on the new year? Do you want your grandma to speak nicely? Old Mrs. Shun looked at Shinjulia with a look of disdain. It's not like you don't know your grandmother. Are you dreaming? Shinjulia found her completely unreasonable. Nanny he quietly carried Yi Qianqian's luggage to the guest room and said, In that case, Miss Yi, let me help you pack. Yi Qianqian quickly waved her hands and said, I think it's better if I do it myself. You go ahead with your work. I can handle such a small matter on my own. Old Mrs. Shun glanced at Yi Qianqian. Her attitude softened a little. He twirled the prayer beads in his hand and didn't say a word. When Shinjulia saw that, he walked up and said, I'll pack up with you. Let's go. He followed Yi Qianqian to the guest room, and Shinjulia closed the door behind him. As soon as Yi Qianqian entered, she tried to listen to the sounds outside. Yi Qianqian didn't know if it was because no one was talking outside, or if it was because the soundproofing inside was really good, but she couldn't hear a single word. Chapter 1886. Shenjilia felt wronged. He grabbed Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "I didn't say that. They probably found out about my flight number and came to pick us up. They just didn't want you to stay in a hotel. What else could I do?" Yi Qianqian was a little angry, but it was their freedom to do what they wanted. What was the point of being angry? Shenjilia looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Don't be angry. Instead of using this time, you should think about how to deal with grandmother." "How else can I deal with her? I don't even have a temper." Shenjilia laughed and said, "But I'm a little embarrassed too." "Why are you embarrassed? You're not the little wife. Do you remember the last time?" "What last time?" Yi Qianqian glared at him. "The last time you came to our house, grandmother threw a tantrum and said that you couldn't get pregnant. Didn't I make up a lie in a moment of desperation?" Yi Qianqian suddenly remembered, and her face immediately turned red. She looked at Shenjilia with wide eyes and said, "Yes, you said I was pregnant the last time. Now what about pregnancy?" Yi Qianqian looked at her flat belly and felt so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. "No wonder. I felt that grandmother had been looking at me, and so had Nanny he. It was weird. I didn't expect it. Sob, so embarrassing." Shenjilia saw her expression and couldn't help but laugh. He said, "Take your time. There's no rush. Actually, I confessed to grandmother a few days ago." Yi Qianqian looked up and widened her eyes. She said angrily, "You played me." As she spoke, she was about to hit him. Shenjilia held her hand. There was a smile in his eyes, and his gentleness was unspoken. "It's just a child. Let's take it slow. Actually, grandmother already relented a few days ago." "Relented?" Yi Qianqian was a little confused. What did he mean? "Didn't you notice that grandmother wasn't as harsh when you came this time?" Yi Qianqian laughed when she heard that. "I really didn't." Shenjilia nodded her head helplessly and said, "You'll slowly realize that grandmother has actually given up." "Hey old Shen." Yi Qianqian hugged Shenjilia's waist and looked aggrieved. "Do you think we're going through a trial? Why are there so many things blocking the way when I want to be together? It makes me wonder if God is jealous of my beauty." Shenjilia burst into laughter. "Don't worry. God isn't just jealous of your beauty." Yi Qianqian was delighted to hear that. "Does that mean that you admit that I'm pretty?" No. I suspect that God appreciates your shamelessness. That's why he's giving you some practice." Yi Qianqian's face darkened. She pushed him away and said, F***CKU. Shenjilia laughed out loud. He couldn't help but reach out to hold her chin and press her face down. When his lips touched hers, he felt a sense of satisfaction and excitement that was hard to contain. Shenjilia slowly pressed her against the door and gently pried open her pearly white teeth. He stirred them delicately and delved deeper. After more than 4 months apart, their feelings for each other had deepened, and their longing for each other had deepened. No matter how many difficulties there were in the middle, he managed to overcome them. There was no reason for him to give up at the last moment. Was there? Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes. She couldn't help but hug him and respond gently. Chapter 1887. Shenjilia's palm was a little cold, and Yi Qianqian shrank back. Shenjilia seemed to have sensed it too. He retracted his hand, held her waist, and lifted her up. Yi Qianqian gasped. Before she could react, Shenjilia had placed her on the bed. Because no one was staying in the room, the bedsheets, quilts, and pillows had been put away. There was only a mattress on the bed. Yi Qianqian felt a little strange, but Shenjilia didn't feel it. He pressed his body against hers, ran his fingers through her hair, and kissed her lightly. Yi Qianqian squirmed and turned her head away. Panting slightly, she said, "Make the bed." "Yeah." Shenjilia was a little reluctant. Yi Qianqian gently pinched his waist, and Shenjilia reluctantly stood up. There were clean bedding in the cabinet. After Shenjilia removed it, Yi Qianqian took it from him and opened the dustproof bag. Shenjilia removed the dustproof cloth from the other furniture in the room. After that, both of them were quite busy. After much effort, They finally finished making the bedsheets, putting in the quilt and pillows. Yi Qianqian was covered in sweat. There was heating in the north. Yi Qianqian hadn't even taken off her down jacket since she entered the room. After busying himself, his face was flushed red from the heat. She unzipped her jacket, but it was still hot. She took off her sweater, leaving only a white, tight-fitting, long-sleeved t-shirt on her upper body. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of a pair of ferocious eyes in the mirror not far away. Yi Qianqian made up her mind. As soon as she turned around, she was pounced on. Yi Qianqian reached out her hand, but before she could struggle, she was pressed down on the bed. Shenjilia bit down on her mouth like a wolf. His big hands moved up and down. Just as he lifted the hem of Yi Qianqian's shirt, she heard a knock on the door. Yi Qianqian's eyes flew open. She made up her mind and pushed Shenjilia hard. Shenjilia looked at the ceiling helplessly and sighed. He straightened his clothes before standing up to open the door. Old Mrs. Shen stood at the door and looked at Shenjilia. "It's time for dinner. So early?" Shenjilia began to suspect that the old lady was deliberately there to cause trouble. When old Mrs. Shen heard that, she snorted and said, "It's getting late. It's already 5:50 p.m. If it weren't for the fact that I don't think you can finish in 10 minutes, I wouldn't have come to call you." Shenjilia was stunned when he heard that. His face darkened as he asked, "Grandma, what the hell are you up to this time?" Yi Qianqian, who was hiding in a corner, blushed when she heard that. "What can I do?" The old lady snorted. "I just saw that you guys stayed in there for so long. You must not have finished cleaning up the house. You can't finish it in 10 minutes. You can clean up after eating." Shenjilia was speechless. He had thought. Yi Qianqian's face turned even redder. She shut her eyes tightly and looked embarrassed. Damn it! She thought the old lady knew what they were doing. How embarrassing! Shenjilia pursed his lips and replied, "Got it. Let's clean up a little longer." Hurry up." After saying this, the old lady turned around. Yi Qianqian had already put on a sweater. When she looked in the mirror, she realized that her lips were a little swollen. She licked them a few times and rubbed them. She tried to look as natural as possible. "It's time for dinner." Chapter 1888. I said it's time for dinner. Why are you still lying down? Get up. Yi Qianqian tugged at him. Grandma seems to be very powerful. I'm a little scared. What's there to be scared of? Shenjilia lay on the bed, feeling a little bored. Wouldn't it be better to spend some alone time in Kingstown? I can't do anything now. It's too cruel. Yi Qianqian didn't know what he was thinking. She looked around and said, "How did Grandma know? Did she put a surveillance camera or something in the room?" Shenjilia laughed and said, "How could that be possible? My grandmother isn't that perverted. But why did she knock on the door so suddenly? It's a coincidence, a coincidence." Shenjilia got up and looked at Yi Qianqian with a helpless expression. "How can you have such a big imagination? You can magnify everything. I have to give it to you." Yi Qianqian pouted and said, "But this is too much of a coincidence. I think this kind of coincidence is too scary." Of all times to knock on the door, it had to be at such an indescribable time. Of all times to call for dinner, it had to be 10 minutes in advance. Yi Qianqian felt a little uncomfortable thinking about it and said, "Old Shen. Yes, I don't think it's appropriate for me to stay in your house without an official title." Shenjilia stared at her with amusement in his eyes. At the same time, there was a hint of menace in them. Yi Qianqian felt a little uncomfortable under his stare and said, "I don't think it's appropriate. Why don't I? Grandma is actually a very good person. Now that she's finally relenting, you shouldn't shrink back." Shenjilia sighed softly. "If you shrink back now, it'll only worsen the good signs." But what could she do? She always felt that the old lady was too mysterious. If she let him stay here alone, would he see a ghost in the middle of the night? Or perhaps a ghost would press down on him. That would be terrible. Yi Qianqian was a little hesitant. Shenjilia reached out and pulled her over. He said softly, "All right, don't think about it anymore. It's not a big deal. You're just too nervous." Yi Qianqian didn't believe him. "Is that so?" Shenjilia gave her a look of certainty and said seriously, "Of course it's true. Let's go for dinner. Can I wear this? Yi Qianqian was wearing a mint green turtleneck sweater, which looked quite warm. But if I don't wear a jacket, will I look weird? Shenjulia didn't mind. It's our home. It's nothing. Didn't Grandma like you a lot in the beginning? Don't be nervous. Mom and Dad have a good impression of you. All right, Yi Qianqian replied. She finally relaxed a little. Shenjulia stood up and said, later on, if you don't know how to speak properly, don't speak. Whatever the elders ask you, just say it. Do you understand? Okay, I'll try my best. Shenjulia was a little worried, but it was almost time. If he didn't go out now, Grandmother would have a problem with him. When he went out, the whole family was present. Shen Luo, and seemed to have just returned from a trip. He was still wearing his jacket, and it looked a little damp. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she didn't immediately recognize her as the girl who had been holding Shen Manting's cell phone. He smiled and nodded, saying, hello. Chapter 1889. However, Shenjulia couldn't help but take another look at Yi Qianqian's face. He was slightly surprised. She looks so much like Yi Yuyu. So that's what Shenjulia likes. Call me big brother. Shenjulia hugged Yi Qianqian from behind and smiled brightly. When Shen Luo saw Shenjulia's expression, he laughed and said in a low voice, idiot. Hey, what do you mean by idiot? Shenjulia hugged Yi Qianqian and gave him a kick. My wife is here. Watch your words. Shen Luo reached out to unbutton his coat, took off his coat, and hung it up. When he heard what Shen Luo said, he gave him a sidelong glance and snorted. He tugged Yi Qianqian into the kitchen to wash her hands and said, let's go. Ignore him. Yi Qianqian didn't want to bother with him at first, especially after she found out about what had happened between him and Shen Manting. She didn't like him at all. Fortunately, she had only seen him a few times. Yi Qianqian had seen Yi Yuyu from afar when they were still husband and wife. Later, after Yi Yuyu had divorced him, Yi Qianqian had met him once or twice. But they didn't interact much. However, Shen Luo and Yi Qianqian didn't like the fact that Shen Manting had run away from home. When she saw that Shen Luo was ignoring her, she felt relieved. They washed their hands and went to the table. The Shen family sat together. It's the new year. It's a blessing for our family to be able to gather together and have a meal together. Shen Longyue smiled and looked at his family with a satisfied look. Shen Longyue looked at Yi Qianqian and said, Qianqian, I don't know what you like to eat, but your aunt prepared a few home-cooked southern dishes for you. She even went to a southern restaurant to learn how to make soup. It took her a few days to learn. Try it. Yi Qianqian was flattered. When she heard that, she instinctively looked at Mrs. Shen. Mrs. Shen looked a little embarrassed and said, no, I'm just interested. Don't listen to your uncle. But try it, it should taste good. Yi Qianqian was moved. She had thought that the Shen family would not welcome her. She did not expect that Mrs. Shen would do this. Was it really as Shenjulia had said? Was she just too nervous? Mrs. Shen took a bowl of soup and filled it for Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian quickly took it from her and said, thank you, Auntie. Qianqian, how do you celebrate the New Year in the South? Is it different from ours? Shen Longyue asked. Yi Qianqian didn't know how the New Year was celebrated in the capital, but she knew how the New Year was celebrated in her hometown. When she heard that, Yi Qianqian felt a lot more relaxed. She slowly began to talk about the customs of her hometown. She didn't know if Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen were really interested, or if they were pretending to be focused, but they seemed to be quite serious. Shen Luo looked at Yi Qianqian and seemed to be thinking about something. Suddenly he nudged Shenjulia and asked, what's your girlfriend's name? Shenjulia was a little confused. He looked at Shen Luo and asked, didn't you know her before? Besides, he often talked about Yi Qianqian at home. No matter what, it was impossible that he didn't know her name, right? I didn't pay attention. I forgot. That's right, this person doesn't care about anything other than what he's interested in. Chapter 1890. Shen Luo froze and instinctively glanced at Yi Qianqian. So it was her. No wonder she looked so much like Yi Yuyu. Shen Luo and Shen Jilia were sitting next to each other, and their voices weren't loud. Yi Qianqian was suddenly stared at, and she instinctively looked back. However, Shen Luo quickly looked away and continued eating. Shen Jilia felt that Shen Luo was a little strange. He suddenly recalled the incident with Yi Qianqian and Shen Manting. Feeling a little strange, he turned to look at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian looked at Shen Jilia and frowned in confusion. It's fine. Let's eat. Shen Jilia pushed her head back. Let's eat or it'll get cold. Old Mrs. Shen reminded her. Shen Longyue also waved his hand and laughed. Look at me. I'm just being considerate. Let's eat. Only then did Yi Qianqian lower her head and eat in silence. After dinner, Yi Qianqian didn't dare to eat too much. Furthermore, she was in someone else's house, so she didn't eat much. After that, he helped to clean up the mess. In the end, he was chased out. Shen Jilia was chatting with Shen Luo on the sofa. She didn't know what they were talking about, but when they saw Yi Qianqian come out, they both looked over. Qianqian, come here. Shen Jilia waved his hand. When Yi Qianqian saw Shen Luo, she felt a little uncomfortable. She felt a little strange all over. She had always felt that Shen Luo was a pervert. Not only had he tainted Yi Yuyu, but he had also defiled his own sister and nearly married a lunatic. Yi Qianqian didn't believe that such a person was mentally sound. She sat down beside Shen Jilia. When she looked up, she saw Shen Luo. Shen Luo seemed to be sizing her up and said, "We finally meet." Yi Qianqian was stunned and didn't know how to react. "I'm sorry about last time." Shen Luo placed a can of beer in front of him. He raised it to Yi Qianqian and said, "If I had known that you would become my sister-in-law, I wouldn't have scolded you." Yi Qianqian finally reacted. She smiled awkwardly, but didn't know what to say. In the future, just forget about it. Shen Luo motioned for her to drink, and drank the rest of the beer in one gulp. Yi Qianqian looked at him and asked, "Well, have you found Shen Manting yet?" Shen Luo was drinking. When he heard this, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Without making a sound, he drank all the wine. Then, he put the can down and said, "Found it. Is she really pregnant?" Yi Qianqian suddenly felt that she was being too unkind when she asked that question. Asking this question at this time was no different from rubbing salt in the wound. So what if she was pregnant? So what if she wasn't? Shen Manting wasn't here, which meant that she wasn't willing to come back with Shen Luo. Or perhaps Shen Luo had no intention of bringing her back. In any case, it was inappropriate for Yi Qianqian to ask about it. Shen Luo laughed and said, "Yes, I'm pregnant. My belly is quite big, and I'm due to give birth in spring. The child is mine." Although Shen Manting had always denied it, but Shen Luo knew that the child must be his. Yi Qianqian felt even more embarrassed. She looked at Shen Jilia for help. Shen Jilia immediately understood. He cleared his throat and said, "Brother, I just remembered that I have something to do. I'll go out with Qianqian for a bit." Chapter 1891. Shen Luo appeared to be smiling. However, when Yi Qianqian looked at him, she inexplicably felt that he was rather pitiful. In fact, he did have feelings for Shen Manting. Yi Qianqian smiled at him and said, "Well, thank you, big brother." Shen Luo was older than her. Even if she wasn't with Shen Jilia, it wouldn't be too much for her to call him big brother. When he heard Yi Qianqian shout, he chuckled and nodded his head. "Go ahead." Shen Jilia returned to his room to retrieve their jackets before he led Yi Qianqian out. The two walked out of the street and were surrounded by familiar neighbors. Regardless of whether they were young or old, when they saw Shen Jilia, they would nod and greet him. Yi Qianqian could tell that Shen Jilia was quite popular. "Old Shen." Shen Jilia looked at her with a puzzled expression and raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Qianqian thought for a moment and asked, "Have you seen Shen Manting until now?" "No." Shen Jilia was very honest. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know how my brother found her, but she refused to come back with my brother. She stayed in the village with a big belly." "In a small village?" "Yeah. In Jiangnan. I heard that he's working as a private tutor or personal assistant. I'm not too sure, But it doesn't seem too difficult. He's just alone. And he doesn't seem to have anyone to take care of him. Yi Qianqian nodded. She was pregnant at Lily's wedding, wasn't she? Probably. It's been so long. Shen Jilia stopped in front of a river and looked at its surface. It was hard to tell what he was feeling. He slowly said, I just don't understand. She already knew she was pregnant. Why did she run away? Since you don't like my brother, why don't you abort the child? Yi Qianqian looked at the puzzled expression on Shen Jilia's face. She seemed to have an inkling of what was going on, but she wasn't sure. Leaning against the railing by the river, Yi Qianqian looked out at the river. A painter once told me about this. Shen Jilia looked at her. Under the hazy night sky, the yellow streetlights shone on Yi Qianqian's face like a painting. Yi Qianqian turned around and looked at Shen Jilia. She slowly said, she said that pregnant women are brainless. They are rational, but they have been brainwashed by the idea of becoming mothers for the first time. They have an inexplicable love and expectation for the little thing in their wombs, who they don't know if it will ever be born. Yi Qianqian looked at Shen Jilia. Shen Jilia raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded. Most of the patients he received were women. Shen Jilia could more or less empathize with her feelings. But he knew Shen Manting very well. He had always thought that Shen Manting was rational and decisive. Could it be that Shen Manting had once kept the child because of her sentiments as a saint? Shen Luoan seemed to understand, but at the same time he didn't. Yi Qianqian looked at the surface of the river and sighed. It's so cold. Shen Jilia hugged her from behind and whispered, let's not go home tonight. Shall we sleep outside? Yi Qianqian turned back to look at him in surprise. When she saw his amber eyes, she seemed to have seen through his intentions. Won't Grandma have any objections? Well. Chapter 1892. Think about it based on her normal reaction. Yes. I think so too. Yi Qianqian turned her head and looked at him. Forget it. It's only the first night. The day after tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I don't think it's a good idea. Shen Jilia looked a little resentful. He leaned against her and blew hot air on her cheek. He gently nuzzled her and said, you have to stay at home on New Year's Eve, the first, and the second day of the Lunar New Year. You can't spend the night outside. Forget it. Why do you have to spend the night outside? Yi Qianqian asked even though she already knew the answer. Her cheeks were a little red from the cold, or from embarrassment. Shen Jilia snorted and leaned over to give her a kiss on the cheek. Yi Qianqian was startled. She twisted her body and looked around. Indeed, there were people watching them. Are you crazy? There are so many people watching. Shen Jilia chuckled and pulled her along. Let's go. Where to? Let's go somewhere fun. Shen Jilia turned his head and smiled brightly. Yi Qianqian vaguely felt that it wasn't that simple. The place they were going to wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. Shen Jilia went back to the car and drove for about 10 minutes before he stopped. After parking the car, Shen Jilia led Yi Qianqian inside. It was Yi Qianqian's first time spending the winter in the north. She found that no matter where she went in the capital, there was a thick layer of cotton curtains at the entrance. Inside, there was a layer of rubber curtains that kept the heat inside well. At the same time, it also served as a soundproof effect. Shen Jilia led Yi Qianqian inside and found that it seemed to be a late-night snack shop. There weren't many people inside, but it looked very lively. When they saw Shen Jilia walk in, a group of people looked over. Oh, old Shen is here. Come, come, come. I was just worried that my luck wasn't that good. Come sit down and take my place. How can I take your place? I don't want to play anymore. Old Shen, come sit here. Oh, you brought a pretty girl with you. Is she your girlfriend? There were many people, but it didn't seem chaotic. Everyone looked very clean, but the atmosphere was noisy like a card game. Shen Jilia led Yi Qianqian inside. Faced with the stares of the people inside, he put his hand on her neck and said, why are you playing cards? Call your sister-in-law. It's really a girlfriend. She's so pretty. Wow, old Shen, where did you get her? Tui, how can you talk about your brother like that? You should be asking him where he picked him up from. He's so lucky. Shen Jilia couldn't help but laugh at their words. He scolded them with a smile. Get lost. She has a good eye for talent. She fell in love with me at first sight. It can't be helped. I'm good looking, unlike you poor losers who only know how to play cards all day. As he spoke, Shinjilia brought over 2 chairs for himself, and Yi Qianqian to sit down. Yi Qianqian had never met Shinjilia's friends. He had met his colleagues a few times, but they were just colleagues in Kingstown. It was a completely different concept from friends. There were about 6 or 7 of them. They all looked to be in their 20s or 30s. Their beer bottles were all over the place, and some of them had very red cheeks. But looking at them, they all had serious looks on their faces. Indeed, birds of a feather flocked together. Even his brother seemed like a good person. Hey, you're so arrogant now that you have a girlfriend. Don't think that I won't dare to beat you up just because your girlfriend is here. Ha 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 ha, stop fooling around. Old Shin, aren't you going to introduce us? I'm Shinjilia. Shinjilia patted his chest. Get lost. Chapter 1893. Yi Qianqian smiled and watched them bicker with each other. Hey, who's here? A familiar voice came. Yi Qianqian and Shinjilia turned their heads at the same time, and saw a man walking over. He was dressed in black casual clothes and looked quite fashionable. His black hair was short, and he looked clean. Yi Qianqian recognized him. Isn't this Luo Zhan? No, that's not right. He has a northern accent. He should be Luo Zhan's twin brother Luo Ran. Luo Ran came up and looked at Shinjilia with a smile. Dr. Shen, why didn't you tell us that you were coming? Shinjilia stood up and punched him. Luo Ran reached out his hand, and their fists collided. Then they clasped hands, and put their arms around each other's shoulders. Shinjilia bumped into him and teased. Aren't you going to the bar to pick up girls today? Bah, no way. Someone shouted and laughed. Someone shouted and laughed out loud. I was almost pestered by a woman. Where did I get the courage to go to the bar now? Ha 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 ha. Not only him, but the people next to him also laughed when they heard it. Xie-yin, shut up. Luo Ran grabbed an empty beer can and threw it at him. Xie-yin dodged and laughed even more arrogantly. You're angry out of shame. Shinjilia was interested and asked curiously. What's going on? There seems to be some hot news. It's more than hot news. It's... Shut up. Luo Ran interrupted him. Another person chimed in. What a disgrace to the little prince of love. Ha 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 ha. There was a roar of laughter. Luo Ran was annoyed and shouted. Are you done? Shinjilia was shocked and looked sideways. Luo Ran's temper was not bad, even better than Shinjilia's. It was rare for him to speak so loudly like today. So what's going on? Shinjilia was even more curious. Xie-yin shrugged and said, The little prince of love won't tell me. The little prince of love is angry. Little prince of love, do you want to drink? Get lost. Luo Ran couldn't bear it anymore. If you say another word, I'll F***ck you. Eft. No one knew who laughed first, but the scene that had just quietened down with great difficulty burst into laughter again. When Yi Qianqian saw the defeated look on Luo Ran's face, she could almost imagine how proud Luo Ran was when he was surrounded by them. That was why they were hitting him when he was down. Shinjilia opened a bottle of wine and took a sip. He chuckled and teased. What goes around comes around. Shut up. Luo Ran turned his head and gently punched him on the shoulder. Aren't you going to introduce us? I was going to introduce her, but you interrupted me. Shinjilia put on an innocent face and put down the beer can. My woman Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian smiled and said, Hello everyone. My name is Yi Qianqian. Hey, she's quite pretty. Why is she a good match for Shinjilia? Bah, it's better than being with you. At least old Shen is still a virgin. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but burst out laughing. She gave Shinjilia a strange look. Shinjilia picked up a few melon seeds and threw them at her. With a dark face he said, Shut up. Oh, I've put in a lot of effort to prove your innocence in front of your girlfriend, but you threw them at my face. Is there any justice in this world? Chapter 1894. Shinjilia's face turned red, and he said confidently, To prove my chastity, I would rather die than submit. Are any of you cleaner than me? Well, I'm not as clean as you, but you're a virgin. As soon as Xie Yin's voice fell, the group of people burst into laughter again. Seeing the group of people laughing so happily, and seeing Shenjilia's slightly red face, Yi Qianqian coughed lightly and said, "Not anymore." The laughter stopped abruptly. Yi Qianqian's face was a little red, and she felt a little embarrassed under the eyes of the people around her. Shenjilia let them laugh because he respected her. Yi Qianqian knew that, but she couldn't stand it anymore when they laughed at him like that. Although she was a little embarrassed, at least when she saw their expressions, Yi Qianqian felt a sense of relief. Shenjilia didn't expect Yi Qianqian to say that. He was surprised, but at the same time he felt happy. Haha. Shenjilia saw the expressions of the group of people, and he had never felt so happy before. He couldn't help but hug Yi Qianqian and kiss her on the cheek. He said, "I wanted to let these guys be proud, but I didn't expect you to be so honest. How boring." Yi Qianqian really wanted to roll her eyes at him. "Look at how proud you are. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be so happy." However, she still had to give a man face. When she heard that, Yi Qianqian lowered her head shyly and said, "Well, I'll bear with it next time and not expose it." Shenjilia looked even more proud. He loved Yi Qianqian's cooperation. When the people around heard that, they all looked angry. "That's too much. You can't show off your love like this. If you have the guts, play cards with us." "Old Shen, I didn't expect you to be so cunning. You deliberately brought your girlfriend to show off. I've seen through you." When Luo Ran saw Shenjilia's proud and arrogant face, he couldn't help but laugh. He took a sip of wine and introduced himself. "Hello, sister-in-law. I'm Luo Ran." As he spoke, Luo Ran pointed to a few people next to him and said, "The one with the nasty mouth is Xie Yin. The one with the reddest face is Lin Bin. The thinnest is Wang Shanin, and..." After introducing them one by one, Yi Qianqian realized that they were all college classmates. Most of them were doctors, but there were also a few from other professions. It could be seen that their relationship was very good. However, after spending some time with Shenjilia, he realized that Luo Ran was the closest to him. No matter what Shenjilia said, Luo Ran could keep up with him. Shenjilia could see through Luo Ran's thoughts. There seemed to be an unsurpassable tacit understanding between the two of them. Just a glance was enough to communicate. In the past, it was the same between her and Fang Tongtong. Since when did everything change? After 3 rounds of drinking, Luo Ran, who had already drunk a little, was forced to drink more by Shenjilia. He was beginning to get drunk. From then on, Shenjilia began to ask Xie Yin about the story of Luo Ran, the famous prince of love who had lost his footing. Yi Qianqian leaned over curiously, but Xie Yin deliberately kept her in suspense and asked, "You want to know? Play a few rounds with us?" Shenjilia replied, "Don't talk too much. Be civilized." "Bah, do you want to fight? Fight." Chapter 1895. Shenjilia knew there must be more to it than meets the eye. Yi Qianqian's interest was piqued when she heard that. Xie Yin smiled and said, "That's not the point. The point is that the lady boss seems to have been paying attention to our little prince of love for a long time. The reason why she hit it off with Luo Ran last time is probably because she's blind." "She's really blind to fall for Luo Ran," Shenjilia said. Yi Qianqian blinked and said, "I think Luo Ran is quite handsome." "Handsome?" Shenjilia glanced at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian stuck out her tongue and didn't say anything. Xie Yin chuckled and said, "His looks are impeccable, but the number of women Luo Ran has slept with must be more than the number of men you've met. He goes to all kinds of nightclubs every day to date women. Can you imagine what kind of woman would fall for him?" Yi Qianqian had heard a little about it, but she didn't expect Luo Ran's private life to be so messy. "Ha ha ha. That woman has a lot of influence. She's very strict about catching him. Basically, every time Luo Ran goes to a bar, that woman will definitely appear. Then, as soon as Luo Ran starts to pick up girls, he'll definitely ruin it. That's really tragic." Shenjilia began to sympathize with him. The little prince of love is going to ruin his reputation. Xie Yin shrugged, opened a bottle of wine, and handed it to Shenjilia. Come play cards. Well, I think we should call it a day. Shenjilia got up and stretched. I have to go back early. Xie seemed to have expected it. He sneered and said, I knew you were this kind of person. So there's more to come. Hearing that, Shenjilia immediately sat down. He moved a stool over and asked, How much do you want to bet? Yi Qianqian was speechless. Almost everyone was drunk. And the game changed from the original bullfight to Golden Flower and Fight the Landlord. In the end, Xie lost and said, I'm not playing anymore. Let's go home and sleep. Wait, you haven't finished yet. Shenjilia grabbed him. What else is there to tell us? Shenjilia was also a little tipsy, but he couldn't forget that incident. Xie yawned and said, Actually, it's not that big of a deal. It's just that you know the principle of the Little Prince of Love. We can't have sex more than 3 times. Ah, how many times did Luo Ran play with her? I don't know. Xie took a sip of wine. But we've seen it more than 3 times. Yi Qianqian secretly clicked her tongue. How could such a person be a doctor? His background seemed to be strong enough. Or was his ability strong enough? Such a person needed to be strong in every aspect. After listening to the gossip, Shenjilia looked at Luo Ran, who was lying on a few chairs and sleeping. He said angrily, You guys take him back later. I'm leaving with my woman. Alright, get lost. Xie yawned and waved at Yi Qianqian. Goodbye, sister-in-law. Goodbye. Yi Qianqian waved back. When Shenjilia came out of the room, he could barely stand in the cold wind. He felt dizzy and collapsed on top of Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian quickly held him up and said, You're really going all out just to get some gossip. Let's take a taxi back. But I'm lucky today. Let's not go back. Let's go there. Chapter 1896. Yi Qianqian was silent. She gritted her teeth and pinched his waist. Shenjilia shrank back, and the weight of his body fell even more toward Yi Qianqian. You've had so much to drink, yet you're still so frivolous. Yi Qianqian's cheeks were red. Be careful of sudden death. Give me the car keys. No walkover. Shenjilia buried his face in the crook of her neck. His words reeked of alcohol. I just don't want to ride in the car anymore. I feel like I'll puke to death if I do. Yi Qianqian turned her head away in disgust and said, Get lost. You stink. I don't want to take the car. Shenjilia said coquettishly. Let's go. Yi Qianqian pursed her lips. In the end, she still half supported him as they walked toward the hotel. After getting a standard room, Yi Qianqian politely declined the waiter's request for help. She helped Shenjilia into the room and finally found the room. She opened the door and threw him onto the bed. Shenjilia was thrown to the ground, and he almost vomited. He opened his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian. His vision blurred. With a look of disgust on her face, Yi Qianqian stepped forward to help Shenjilia take off his coat. She then went to boil a pot of water for him. There was fruit juice in the fridge. He took out the sour plum juice and warmed it in the kettle. When Shenjilia was helped up to drink the sour plum juice, he was a little confused and asked, Isn't this sour plum juice? Yeah, sour plum soup to cure the hangover. I don't know, but I know that sour plum soup can stop vomiting. Yi Qianqian helped him up and poured the plum soup into his mouth. Shenjilia couldn't drink anymore and turned his head away. My stomach is full of water. Can't you feel sorry for me? Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth and smacked him in the stomach. Shenjilia wailed and looked at Yi Qianqian pitifully. Serves you right. I need to go to the bathroom, Shenjilia whispered. No matter how Yi Qianqian heard it, this guy sounded like he was acting coquettishly. Go by yourself. What if you fall? So what if you fell? Why did you drink so much? Although she said that, Yi Qianqian still supported him and walked step by step to the bathroom. After urinating, Yi Qianqian touched his neck and realized that there was a thin layer of sweat on it. She unhappily took off his sweater and scolded. You don't know how to say it when it's hot. You might as well die from the heat. Hot? You're only telling me now? I've already taken it off. Shenjilia opened his eyes in a daze. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, Of course not. You lied to me. Yi Qianqian was speechless. Ignoring him, Yi Qianqian took off her coat and sweater and went to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, Shen Jilia was sprawled on the bed, wearing only a thin layer of clothing. His cheeks were flushed, and his breathing was even. He had fallen asleep. Yi Qianqian straightened his legs. When she finally managed to get him to lie down properly, Shen Jilia turned around and slapped her to the ground. Yi Qianqian was startled and turned to look at him. She didn't know if Shen Jilia was conscious or not, but he tugged on her leg. His entire body was like a buckle, and he locked her firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian felt a little chilly and pushed him away. "The blanket is under you. Get up." Shen Jilia nudged her. The smell of alcohol was strong. Yi Qianqian looked away in disgust and struggled with all her might. Not only did she fail to break free, but she was also pinned down by Shen Jilia. Then, the smell of alcohol was forced into his mouth. Yi Qianqian frowned and looked away. Shen. Chapter 1897. Although there was a heater in the room, the temperature was not particularly high. Shen Jilia's kiss sent chills down her spine. However, he couldn't break free even if he wanted to. The drunken Shen Jilia seemed to be much stronger than usual. After getting used to the taste in his mouth, it didn't seem that bad anymore. But she was really afraid that he would suddenly vomit and dirty her. She tried to push him away, but Shen Jilia's hand seemed to have eyes of its own. Even though his eyes were closed, he was able to firmly grasp her hand. He hooked his leg and pressed it between her legs. Yi Qianqian was so sensitive that she trembled. She simply gave up resisting. She reached out, unbuckled his belt, and tore his shirt open almost roughly. After not seeing him for 4 months, it was impossible for her not to miss him. Perhaps it was because it had been a long time, but Yi Qianqian didn't have a particular need for such things. It was just that at this moment, his body felt a little hot from the teasing. Shen Jilia suddenly opened his eyes. His palms pushed her clothes higher, and his movements gradually became gentler. It was only then that Yi Qianqian realized what was going on. What the f***ck? Pretending to be drunk? However, it was too late now. Shen Jilia pulled up the blanket and covered the two of them. Yi Qianqian's breathing became more and more erratic. "I missed you." Shen Jilia's voice was low, and it carried the sexiness of drunkenness. Yi Qianqian opened her eyes and saw him crawling on top of her. She looked loyal and adorable. She couldn't help but raise her head to kiss him, but Shen Jilia kissed her back forcefully. The night was long, but the night was short. Perhaps it was because of the alcohol, but Shen Jilia was exceptionally rough this time. Yi Qianqian almost punched him and shouted, "Slow down." Shen Jilia chuckled and said slowly, "Don't worry. It won't be too soon." Yi Qianqian replied, "Yeah, you bastard." Yi Qianqian didn't know what time it was when it ended. She drifted off to sleep, only to be woken up again in a daze. Yi Qianqian was shocked. She snapped out of it and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" He wanted to close his legs, but they were immediately pried open. "Don't move. Enjoy it." When he slept, he didn't draw the curtains. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. Yi Qianqian felt that she might fall apart from the torment, but her eyes were blinded by the bright sky. She got up and drew the curtains before climbing back into bed to continue sleeping. However, as soon as he climbed up, he was hugged tightly. Yi Qianqian stiffened and warned, "If you mess with me again, I'll kill you." Shen Jilia chuckled and said, "I'm done. I'm going to sleep." Yi Qianqian was infuriated by his laughter. She pushed and kicked him, but that wasn't enough. She bit down on his neck. Shen Jilia screamed, "I am murder." Yi Qianqian didn't exert much force. When she heard him scream so miserably, she immediately let go. "Bah! Bah!" Shen Jilia hugged her tighter and whispered, "Aren't we going to sleep?" Yi Qianqian kicked him and yelled, "Do you have a death wish?" Shen Jilia chuckled. He held her in his arms as he closed his eyes and whispered, "I want a child." Yi Qianqian closed her eyes and opened them again. Chapter 1898. Shen Jilia's voice was very low, and he sounded very sleepy. Shen Jilia's eyes were half closed, and his breathing was even. She turned her body slightly and hugged his head. She whispered, "Actually, it's not that important whether we get married or not. It's just a certificate. It's no big deal." Shinjilia didn't open his eyes. He silently moved closer and hugged Yi Qianqian tighter. Yi Qianqian continued, "Although we're not married yet, what's the difference between us and those who are married? Yes, there's no difference. We'll still be together. We'll still eat and sleep. We'll do whatever married people can do. Getting married isn't just for the sake of making love." Shinjilia raised his head. His straightforwardness made Yi Qianqian blush. "I can also give birth to your child legitimately and let you call my parents mom and dad. Your father and I can call each other father and son. I can also make your home my home and my home your home. From then on, you and I will recognize each other, and the law will bind us together. When that time comes, we will never be able to separate." Shinjilia's long speech made Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. She reached out to caress his face and asked, "Are you afraid that I'll run away with someone else?" "I am afraid. Don't worry." Yi Qianqian kissed him on the lips. "Other than death, nothing can separate us." As he spoke, he raised his left hand. On it was a sparkling diamond ring. "We're already married. It's just a formality." Shinjilia pressed her hand down and held her in place. In a low voice he said, "That's exactly what I want." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Actually, she really wanted it. "Oh, I'm so sleepy." Yi Qianqian changed the topic. "I'll take a nap." "Yes." Shinjilia calmed down. He hugged her and closed his eyes. She slept all the way until noon. When she woke up, Shinjilia was in the bathroom taking a shower. Yi Qianqian yawned and picked up her clothes. By the time he finished showering and blow-drying his hair, it was already past 2 in the afternoon. After checking out of the room, Yi Qianqian felt a little guilty at the thought of going back. "How about we don't go back?" They pretended that they hadn't just woken up and had been out for the whole day. Shinjilia could tell what she was thinking at first glance. He chuckled and said, "Let's go eat first." "All right," Yi Qianqian replied, but she felt like she was floating as she walked. As she supported Shinjilia, Yi Qianqian was slightly annoyed and said, "There won't be a next time. If this kind of perverted torture happened again, she might really fall apart." Shinjilia pretended not to hear her. He pulled her into his arms and returned to the spot where he had parked the day before. The two of them found a place to eat, and Shinjilia took Yi Qianqian out to play. Considering that Yi Qianqian's legs weren't working well the night before, Yi Qianqian took her to play some activities that weren't physically taxing and didn't require her to walk. During that time, Mrs. Shun called him several times, but Shinjilia brushed it off vaguely. When he got home, it was already past 8 o'clock in the evening. Mrs. Shun and Shun Longyue were sitting on the sofa watching TV. When they saw them, the couple looked at each other, but didn't say anything. They pretended not to see them. Yi Qianqian felt extremely awkward and greeted them. "Hello, uncle." "Hello, auntie. You're back. Do you want to eat?" "Nanny," he came up to them and asked. "I left some food for you. Shall I heat it up for you?" Chapter 1899. "Okay, let's heat it up. We haven't eaten yet." It had been a while since he had eaten in the afternoon. When Nanny he heard that, she turned and went into the kitchen. Shinjilia led Yi Qianqian to the sofa and sat down. Mrs. Shun glanced at Shinjilia and said, "Your brother went to look for Manting." "Huh." Shinjilia was surprised. "When did you go there?" "This afternoon. I heard that Manting isn't in good health. It's the new year." So she abandoned her home and went to look for that woman. The old lady's unhappy words were heard, and it sounded like she was very angry. When Yi Qianqian heard the old lady's voice, she subconsciously turned her head to look. Old Mrs. Shun was in her pajamas. She glanced at Yi Qianqian and said, "You're finally back. I thought you were going to kidnap my grandson." Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. She looked at the old lady and greeted, "Hello, Grandma." Shinjilia wasn't happy to hear that. He interjected, "If anyone is going to kidnap someone, it should be me. How can a grown man like me be kidnapped?" "Humph." Old Mrs. Shun sat down and said, "Jilia, don't go out all day. It's the new year. Stay at home. I'm just going out to play. I'll bring Chantian to meet my brother. Everyone says that Chantian is very pretty. Beauty can be used to make a living. Old Mrs. Shun glanced at Yi Chantian. It's not enough to be pretty. You have to be virtuous. My wife is very virtuous. She knows how to do housework and cook. She's very good at it, Shunjilia said proudly. She felt a little guilty. In reality, when they lived together, Shunjilia was the one who did the work. Old Mrs. Shun didn't know that. She believed him without a doubt and said, as long as you like it. Of course, I like it very much. Jilia, it's time to eat. Nanny, he called out. All right, let's go eat. Shunjilia pulled Yi Chantian up, and the two of them sat at the table together. The food was delicious. Yi Chantian held her chopsticks and glanced at Shunjilia. Shunjilia looked at her at the same time. They stared at each other for a while before they both burst out laughing. Yi Chantian lowered her head silently. Her heart felt like it was filled with honey. As long as you like it. Of course I love it. Connecticut. The weather was cold, but the Lee family's old residence was very lively. There were doctors in civilian clothes coming and going, and everyone in the Lee family was smiling. Northbound. Northbound. Ah. A woman's scream came from inside the room. Outside, Li Beixing was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He paced left and right, and when he heard his wife's screams inside, he became even more anxious and sweaty. Mom, I want to go inside. Qin Shuhua held her son's hand outside. Smiling helplessly and happily, she said, No, women are giving birth. Men are not allowed in. Li Beixing was about to go crazy. He shouted, My wife is giving birth inside, not someone else's wife. Why can't I go in? No. Qin Shuhua was very insistent. She pulled Li Beixing away and said, If a man goes in, it's not good for the pregnant woman. How can there be so many feudal superstitions? I don't believe it. Chapter 1900. Li Xiqing glanced at Li Beixing and said, Why are you so agitated? Your wife is worried about you in there. When Li Beixing heard this, he was exasperated. He gritted his teeth and said, It's easy for you to say that. It's not like your wife is giving birth. Of course you're not anxious. Let's see how your wife looks when she gives birth. Li Xiqing shrugged and said, It's not like my wife hasn't given birth before. She even gave birth to 2. Now that she's only giving birth to 1, it will definitely be easier than the first time. As he spoke, his face was filled with pride. Li Beixing was annoyed when he saw his smug look, so he simply stopped looking at him and sat on the stool that Lu Sa had brought over at the door of the room. Qin Shuhua was still worried. She stood where she was and stared at Li Beixing, afraid that he would slip in if she wasn't careful. Sitting on the sofa, Li Xiqing glanced at her belly. It wasn't big, not even as big as when she was pregnant with Desu and Ursu for more than 7 months. So it shouldn't be that painful, right? In fact, Li Xiqing was not sure. Arguing with Li Beixing just now was just him being stubborn. Only the heavens knew that this was the first time he was truly witnessing the birth of his own child. Desu and Ursu had grown up, and Li Xiqing owed them 4 years. As for this child, he had to take good care of him until he grew up. When Li Jinnan saw how focused Li Xiqing was, he called out, Second brother. Yes. Li Xiqing looked up. Nervous? Li Xiqing pursed his lips and said, No. But why do you look so nervous? Li Jinnan teased. What's there to be afraid of? It's not the first time second sister-in-law has given birth. Glancing at him, Li Xiqing decided not to talk. Su Qianxi also felt his nervousness. She reached out and gently comforted the back of his hand, saying, It's okay. Giving birth is actually not very painful. After all, Su Qianxi had a difficult delivery last time. After the natural birth failed, anesthetics were applied, and the child was cut out. It was very painful, but she could not remember exactly how painful it was. F***ck, Li Beixing suddenly shouted. What kind of stupid rule is this? You can't go to the hospital during the new year. And you can't go to the hospital when you're giving birth. What's the point of having a hospital then? Both Qin Shuhua and Lu Sa laughed at his words. Lu Sa said, Young people just can't keep their cool. Young mistress is doing fine now. The doctors have prepared all the equipment. When we gave birth, it was really miserable. We couldn't go to the hospital all year round, and the equipment wasn't as advanced as it is now. Think about how much we suffered. That's right. When your mother gave birth, she hired a midwife at home. Qin Shuhua was a bit angry, but she was also looking forward to it. She said, I don't know if Manyu's child is a boy or a girl. It would be great if it's a girl. In your dreams. Old Master Li slowly walked out of the room, with the help of his walking stick. It has always been difficult for the Li family to have a daughter. It's not like you don't know that. It had always been like this. In Li Xiqing's generation, Li Weiya was the only woman in the Li family. Later, Su Qianxi's belly worked hard and gave birth to a pair of twins, a girl. At this moment, the one in Qiu Manyu's belly was probably Xian. Chapter 1901. Old Master Li's words made everyone laugh. Yi Yu came up and helped Old Master Li to sit on the sofa. Old Master Li snorted and said, What are you laughing at? Am I right? Old Master Li's back was hunched, and his silver hair was loose. The wrinkles and age spots on his face were obvious. He slowly walked to the sofa and said, In the past, there were midwives who worked on their own. Now when people want to deliver a baby, they have to go to a hospital to hire a midwife. Oh no, the name is much more elegant now. People call them obstetricians and gynecologists. Grandpa, have some tea. Su Qianxi handed a cup of tea to Old Master Li and couldn't help but laugh. The doctor is still inside. He won't be happy if he hears this. How can he not be happy? Old Master Li took the tea. He can earn extra money during the new year. He must be very happy. But Qianqian, why didn't the children come? The children are at home. Daisa brought his friend over for the new year. Nanny Rong has nothing to do at home this year, so I asked her to take care of the children for me. We will go back to our hometown for the new year tomorrow. Su Qianxi sat next to Li Xiqing and spoke of the children with a gentle smile on her face. Old Master Li heard that and nodded. That's great. It's great that the children are so obedient. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to take care of the 3 children by yourself. But is Daisa's friend the little guy who came from the capital last time? Yes, his name is Chu. Well, his full name is Yu Chulin, right? It sounds quite nice. Old Master Li nodded. Qianqian's child, whether it's a boy or a girl, has been named Li Moyun. Grandpa, what about me? Li Jinan leaned over. This is my first child. Grandpa, please help me name him. I'll help you. What should he be called? I don't know. Li Jinan had left the name for Old Master Li, so he didn't even think about it. I've already named the eldest. If it's a boy, he'll be called Li Yuanhang. If it's a girl, she'll be called Li Qinhuan. Sounds good. Li Jinan quickly flattered. What about mine? With a look of disgust, Old Master Li reached out and pushed his face, saying, Don't worry about it. I'll think about it slowly. Li Xiqing smiled and said, Grandpa, I bought some bacon for you. I'll ask Mom to make some for you later. I don't have any teeth. I can't eat anymore. Old Master Li snorted and turned his head away. Why don't you get me something soft to eat? It's specially processed, so it's not hard. Su Qianxi interrupted. I've tasted it. It's very soft and melted in my mouth, but it still tastes very good. What's the point of that? The old man sighed. I'm old. Being able to live to this age is already a blessing. What else can I hope for? I have a house full of grandchildren, and everything else is perfect. Wow! The loud cry of a baby drew the attention of everyone in the room. Li Beixing was like a spring that had been released. He jumped up, laughed loudly, and said, I've given birth. As he spoke, he wanted to go in. Don't let him in. I'll wash the baby. Of course, Qin Shuhua knew. While she was excited, she pressed down on her son and asked, Is it a boy or a girl? Chapter 1902. The doctor's voice made Li Beixing's heart, which had been on tenterhooks for a long time, relax. When Qin Shuhua saw her eldest son like this, she sighed and said, Our Beixing is a father now. Time really flies. How is it fast? Beixing is already in his 30s, and it's his first time becoming a father. Even his younger brother is faster than him. Li Xiao heard the commotion and walked out with a smile on his face. Li Beixing didn't mind being scolded. He stood at the door and waited for the person inside to open the door. Finally, the doctor came out in a short while. The baby was wrapped very well. His eyes were closed, and his lips were pursed. His tiny body was covered in a layer of red. When Qin Shuhua saw the chubby baby, she was overjoyed. She took him from him and hugged him in her arms. She said happily, "You've finally given birth. Hey, let grandma give you a hug." When Li Beixing saw his son, he smiled contentedly and immediately slipped inside. When everyone saw Li Beixing's actions, they couldn't help but laugh. Qiumanyu was exhausted inside. It was winter, but her body was covered in a layer of sweat. A nurse was cleaning Qiumanyu under a thick quilt. When she saw Li Beixing enter, she exclaimed, "Why did you come in?" Li Beixing didn't care. He went forward to look at his wife. Qiumanyu's usually pretty face was pale. Li Beixing's heart ached as he said, "It's been hard on you." Qiumanyu opened her eyes and groaned weakly. "Treat me better in the future." Definitely. Both Su Qianxi and Yi Yi were pregnant. The three brothers and sisters-in-law had all taken turns to give birth. The news had spread throughout the neighborhood. Qin Shuhua carried the chubby baby over to the sofa and said, "He looks really good. He looks just like our Beixing." This was the first time Yi Yi had seen a newborn. She leaned over to take a look and didn't know what to say. "Does he look good?" When Su Qianxi saw Yi Yi's expression, she knew what was going on. She chuckled and said, "Babies are all wrinkled when they're born. They'll look better when they're all grown up. He looks like an old man." Li Jinan didn't mince his words. He took a look and asked, "Is big brother coaxing sister-in-law inside?" "Oomph. Of course we have to coax her during childbirth." Qin Shuhua played with her grandson without looking up. When Xianqian gave birth to Desu and Ersu, Xiqing was not by her side. At that time, Xianqian stayed in the hospital for half a month before she was discharged. She did not have a man by her side. "This time, you have to make it up to Xianqian." Qin Shuhua glared at him. "Otherwise, even your mother won't let you go." Li Xiqing was already feeling guilty. Hearing Qin Shuhua's words, he felt that he was lacking a lot. Holding her hand, he put it on his lips and kissed it without saying anything. Su Qianxi's eyes softened as she whispered, "It's okay. As long as you're back." "I'm back." "When our Moyen is born, I'll definitely make up for what I owe Desu and Ersu." "How can it be made up?" Li Jinan glanced at Li Xiqing. "The twins are very noisy." Yi Yu tugged at him and said, "Second uncle had no choice back then. What are you talking about him for?" Chapter 1903. The resentment in his words was clear. Li Jinan was simply feeling indignant on Su Qianxi's behalf. That was all. When Yi Yu heard that, she felt a little uncomfortable. What did Li Jinan mean by that? Although she didn't know what had happened back then, she had heard a little about it. After Li Xiqing's death, one of Su Qianxi's best friends had come to woo her. What was even more frightening was that Captain Li had been very supportive of that person. If Su Qianxi hadn't been determined, she would have been poached away. Yi Yu didn't feel good when she thought of that. Su Qianxi had been a widow that year, and he hadn't been happy about it. Could he still be interested in her? Furthermore, this was her second marriage. Was Li Jinan hinting at something in his words? She instinctively glanced at Li Jinan, who quickly turned back to look at Yi Yu. Li Jinan didn't know what she was thinking. Confused, he asked, "Isn't that right, honey?" Yi Yu smiled and nodded her head. Su Qianxi quickly waved her hands and said, all right. Xiqing was just thinking about our future. If it hadn't been for those 4 years, we might still be living in fear. The Tang family wouldn't let them off. Su Qianxi knew that very well. Let bygones be bygones. What's the point of saying that? Captain Li paused his walking stick with a displeased expression. Li Xiqing was silent. He gave Li Jinan a meaningful look. The Li family was overjoyed. Lu Sa had cooked a lot of delicious dishes to celebrate. Li Beixing was immersed in the happiness of the birth of his first son. Li Xiqing asked Su Qianxi to stay at the old manor, while he went to pick up the children for dinner. The whole family was happy and harmonious. However, it wasn't so peaceful on the way back. Li Jinan drove, and Yi Yu sat in the front passenger seat. Yi Yu reclined the seat and leaned back. She called out, "Hubby." "Yeah. Did you like second sister-in-law in the past?" Yi Yu's question was more direct. She had been holding these words in for a long time. When she heard Li Jinnan's indignation for Su Qianxi, she couldn't stop it. She felt that if she didn't say it out loud, she would go crazy. When Li Jinnan heard that, he turned to look at her and asked, "Why would you ask that? Do you remember when my sister's friend Lily took us out to play? It was a long time ago," and Li Jinnan had no recollection of it. He glanced at Yi Yu and asked, "What do you think?" "At that time, I felt that you had a different feeling for your second sister-in-law. I always felt that you had a crush on her." Yi Yu had always been a straightforward person. When she spoke, she turned her head and stared at Li Jinnan. Her fair face was filled with accusation, doubt, and sadness. Li Jinan hadn't expected Yi Yu to ask such a question. He was amused and replied, "Why would you think that? Second sister-in-law belongs to second brother. Why would I like her?" There had been a small spark, but before it could ignite, he had resolutely cut it off. Later, he only had respect for her. Li Jinnan didn't even dare to like her as a friend, let alone have a crush on her. Chapter 1904. Of course it's true. Why would you think that? You're just imagining things. Li Jinnan held onto the steering wheel and smiled helplessly. If second brother hears this, he'll chop me to death. Li Xiqing was very possessive. If he knew that someone wanted to lay a finger on his wife, he would definitely hack him to death. Even his younger brother was no exception. Even if it was just a misunderstanding, it wouldn't do. But I keep having this feeling. Yi Yu pouted slightly. Furthermore, I keep feeling that the words you say at home are ambiguous. What is it? What do you mean by saying that if it were any other woman, she would remarry? Are you trying to say that if it were me, I would remarry? Yi Yu's voice was laced with accusation, dissatisfaction, and grievance. Li Jinnan felt wronged and said innocently, "I didn't mean that. I just feel sorry for second sister-in-law." He turned to look at Yi Yu. Yi Yu's face looked haggard. It was obvious that she hadn't had a good rest. Li Jinnan sighed softly and said, "Honey, don't let your imagination run wild. I only love you, and you are the only one I have ever loved. There has never been anyone else." Yi Yu's expression softened when she heard that. However, there was still sadness in his eyes. Li Jinnan looked at Yi Yu and continued. Back then, second sister-in-law managed second brother's company all by herself. It wasn't easy. When she was pregnant, she had to stay up late to look at the proposals and give her suggestions. At that time, second sister-in-law was pregnant with twins. Her belly was much bigger than the average pregnant woman's. She had more severe reactions, and her back and legs often hurt. She couldn't even sit still. Li Jinnan's words were full of emotion. Originally, second sister-in-law didn't have to bear such a heavy responsibility. If second brother was here, second sister-in-law not only didn't have to do those things, but also could live a very relaxed and happy life. So I feel sorry for second sister-in-law. You sure know a lot about it. Yi Yu's tone was a little sour as she turned her head away. Li Jinnan chuckled and replied, "At that time, only second sister-in-law and I were managing the company. Of course I knew. It's not an exaggeration to say that the reason I have the skills I have today is because of second sister-in-law's guidance." When Yi Yu heard that, she felt even more uncomfortable. So, Li Jinan and Su Qianxi had been together for 4 years? For 4 years, they faced each other, and were together every day. It was no wonder that Li Jinan had a different feeling for her. Yu, if I had any feelings for second sister-in-law, something would have happened a long time ago. The only reason it hasn't happened is that the situation doesn't allow it. If the situation allowed it, you would have? Yi Yu asked out of reflex. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that something was amiss. Yi Yu secretly clicked her tongue in frustration. Li Jinnan glanced at her and replied, "There won't be such a time." Once she's second sister-in-law, she'll always be second sister-in-law. Sister-in-law can only be sister-in-law. She looked at him and softly said, I'm sorry. Chapter 1905. Li Jinnan chuckled helplessly. What? Do all pregnant women like to let their imaginations run wild? Li Jinnan didn't know what to do with her. He held his forehead and said, That's not what I meant. Yi Yu felt even more aggrieved and said, Let me tell you, if a man really comes to seduce me, I won't leave Li Jinnan. I believe that you won't. No, even if you die I won't. Yi Yu interrupted him. I can be like second sister-in-law. Li Jinnan couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. The car had already entered the neighborhood. Li Jinnan drove steadily. The speed of the car wasn't fast. He slowly looked at the greenery around him. He was in a good mood. Yi Yu continued. Although I might not be able to manage such a big company as well as second sister-in-law, I will try my best. I will take good care of the child and raise him well. If that doesn't work, I will study. If second sister-in-law can do it, so can I. Yi Yu's eyes lit up. Li Jinnan couldn't hold back his laughter. He stopped the car and leaned over the steering wheel to laugh. Yi Yu panicked and said, What are you laughing at? I'm serious. Are you hoping for me to die? Li Jinnan asked with a laugh as he wiped his eyes. Yi Yu was annoyed when she heard that. She pinched his arm and said, You know what I mean. Ha ha ha. Li Jinnan unbuckled his seatbelt and said, I know, but what you said will never happen. I'm just saying what if. There's no what if. Li Jinnan leaned over and unbuckled Yi Yu's seatbelt. He gently said, We can still love for a long time. His low voice was magnetic and flirtatious. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat at that moment. She found herself looking into Li Jinnan's deep, dark eyes. She fell. It was out of control. Li Jinnan cupped her face with his large hands and kissed her gently. It was a light and gentle kiss. Yi Yu pursed her lips. Li Jinnan quickly got out of the car and opened the door for her. He helped her out. Li Jinnan looked at her belly. He was filled with the joy and excitement of being a father for the first time. Do you think our child will be a boy or a girl? Yi Yu asked. Maybe a girl. It's probably a boy. Grandpa said it's impossible for it to be a girl. I like girls. It must be a girl. 321. The tender voice was like a sweet and sticky cotton candy. Li Jianyue turned around abruptly, but there was nothing behind her. A naughty smile appeared on his young face as he said, Brothers, I'm here to look for you. However, there was still no movement in the empty living room. Li Jianyue was wearing a pink princess dress and a pink bow hairpin in her hair. Her round face was like a jade sculpture, and her big black grape-like eyes were rolling around. She tiptoed as she said, Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, where are you? Can you cough or sneeze? No one answered. I won't find you. Still no one answered. With a crafty look on his face, he shouted into the air. A little Sue. You came at the right time. Come and help me find my brother. No, Ursa can't cheat. Chapter 1906. Li Jianyue ran behind the curtains in the living room. Her crisp laughter was very eye-catching in the living room. She lifted the curtains, but didn't see anyone. Li Jianyue was a little unhappy. She walked all the way and shouted, Brother Mosen, you little liar. Where are you? Ursa can't find you. However, no one answered. Li Jianyue walked forward a little discouraged. She turned left and right and finally went into the kitchen. The kitchen was clean and tidy. Li Jianyue walked in and shouted, Brother Chu, Brother Mosen, brother, where are you? As she shouted, she yawned. She opened the fridge and tiptoed to get herself a bottle of milk. She removed the straw and inserted it into the bottle. Then she started drinking. Li Jianyue sat on the sofa and felt deeply defeated. While drinking, Li Jianyue suddenly thought of a place. She took a step and went behind the stairs. Behind the stairs was a small storage room, in which there were a few toys that the children usually played with. Every time she played hide and seek, she wouldn't look for this place. Of course, she didn't find anyone. Li Jianyue felt that she was very quick-witted. She shouted proudly, I know where you are. Her short legs moved, and she was already in front of the cubicle by the stairs. Li Jianyue twisted the door and walked in. However, the lights inside were on, but there was no one. Li Jianyue looked at the room full of toys and felt even more defeated. She could only close the door and then sighed. However, she suddenly thought of something and turned to open the door again. She looked behind the door. Indeed, a tall figure was behind the door. Li Jianyue was happy and was about to cheer when Yu Chulin immediately put his hand to his mouth and said, "Shoo." Seeing him like this, Li Jianyue felt that it was a little fun to be mysterious. She also put a finger to her mouth and said, "Shoo." Yu Chulin was older than them, so he was naturally taller than them. Seeing Li Jianyue's short body, Yu Chulin looked down and said, "Come in." Li Jianyue blinked her eyes, which were as big as black grapes, and stared at Yu Chulin. Yu Chulin was very fair. It was not as fair as Li Mosen's natural white complexion. Instead, it was the healthy skin of an Asian. She had a high nose bridge, red lips, and beautiful eyes. When Li Jianyue first saw Yu Chulin, she felt that he was very good-looking. When Li Jianyue heard him calling for her, she sneaked in mysteriously and asked, "Brother Chu, what are you doing here?" Yu Chulin took out an assembled tank that could fire a cannon with the press of a button. But now, the entire toy was in a mess, and it looked like it was broken. "Brother Chu, this is Brother Mosen's favorite toy. If you break it, Brother Mosen will be angry." Li Jianyue's eyes widened as she stared at the toy. There was a stern warning on her face, but at the same time there was worry. "What should we do? Brother Mosen will be sad if he sees this." On Yu Chulin's fair face, his rosy lips were tightly pursed. There was an apologetic look on his childish face as he said, "I accidentally touched it just now and fell. I'll fix it." Chapter 1907. Her. Help. Yu Chulin wanted to laugh. In the past, he had only heard Li Jianxian talk about his sister. According to his good friend Li Jianxian, his sister only had 3 characteristics: stupid, silly, and silly. Yu Chulin had naively thought that Li Jianxian was just joking. He didn't expect that after a few days of interaction, she was indeed quite silly. However, it wasn't to the extent that Li Jianxian had described. Yu Chulin had never liked to play with girls since he was young. However, when he heard Li Jianyue's suggestion, he pursed his lips and nodded. "Don't talk. Just sit and watch." "Oh, does Brother Chu really know how to repair it?" Li Jianyue found it a little unbelievable. "I heard that the assembly of this tank is very complicated. Even when my father brought it back, it took him many minutes to assemble it." "How many minutes is that? How many minutes?" Li Jianyue couldn't tell. When she heard the question, she blushed and said, "Just many minutes." Yu Chulin laughed and sat down cross-legged again. Li Jianyue blinked her eyes at the way he was concentrating on his task. "Brother Chu, your eyelashes are so long." Chu was indifferent. He stared at the thing in his hand and frowned slightly. "Brother Chu, I've caught you. You'll be the ghost next." "Okay. Wait for me," Yu Chulin replied. He seemed a little troubled. "Brother Chu, how did you know to hide here? Did my brother teach you that?" Li Jianyue felt that it was very smart to think of hiding here. What was even more smart was that she actually thought of such a place to hide. She felt that she was even smarter. Yu Chulin responded calmly and stared at the tank in his hand. "I knew it. Brother Chu, isn't my brother amazing? The adults say that my brother's grades are excellent. They say that my brother is very smart and can skip a grade next year." Li Jianyue rested her chin on her hand as she watched Yu Chulin's busy hands. She pouted and said, "If only I could be as good as my brothers. I want the adults to praise me too." Brother Chu, do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults?" Yu Chulin was speechless. Yu Chulin furrowed his eyebrows and looked up at her. When Li Jianyue saw that he was finally looking at her, she giggled and said, "Brother Chu, were you dumb in the past too? Did you only become smart later on?" "No. I don't believe it." Li Jianyue pouted. "Granny Rong said that every child has to learn. I'm very smart. It's just because my brothers are boys that I foolishly climbed the stairs." "You want to talk about stages, right?" When Li Jianyue heard this, she immediately understood. She nodded and said with a smile, "Yes. The stage, the section of the ladder." "Yu Chulin. Brother Chu, you haven't answered me yet. Do you feel happy when you're praised by the adults?" "I'm used to it. I don't feel anything." Yu Chulin's answer was simple and clear. Li Jianyue pouted. Brother said the same thing. "Only Brother Mosen would tell me the truth." "What did Mosen tell you?" "He said he was happy. He was as happy as when Ursu was praised." Li Jianyue smiled. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.